I told my wife it's either counseling or divorce. When I first met Rachel, she was the kind of woman who filled up every room she walked into. Loud laugh, bright eyes, the kind of energy that made you feel like life could be spontaneous again. I was drawn to her like a moth to a flame. She was exciting, unpredictable, alive. I'd been through a long, dull breakup right before meeting her, and being with Rachel felt like waking up after a long sleep. We got married 5 years ago. I remember thinking on our wedding day that no matter what challenges came, we'd figure them out because we genuinely loved each other. We weren't perfect, but we had chemistry and humor. I believed that mattered most. But over the last 2 years, that spark turned into something else, like static that never stopped buzzing. Every small disagreement became a shouting match. Every attempt to talk turned into sarcasm or defensiveness. I can't even pinpoint when things shifted. Maybe it was after the pandemic, when we were around each other 24/7. Or maybe it started when I got promoted and began working longer hours. Rachel said I'd changed. I said she was impossible to please. Both statements had truth in them. What I do know is that somewhere between the job stress, her growing resentment, and our inability to talk without arguing, something broke. At first, I thought we were just in a rough patch. All couples have them, right? But it started getting darker. Rachel would pick fights over the smallest things. How I folded the laundry, what show I watched, even how I breathed sometimes. She'd slam cabinets when she was mad, mutter under her breath, or go completely silent for days. The silence was the worst part. When I'd try to ask what was wrong, she'd say, "If you don't know, I'm not going to tell you." It was like being punished for something I couldn't name. One night, after a particularly bad argument about me forgetting to pick up milk, I found myself sleeping in the guest room for the first time. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. Made coffee, asked if I wanted toast. I looked at her, completely drained, and said, "We can't keep doing this." She shrugged and said, "Then don't forget the milk next time." That's when I realized it wasn't just the fighting. It was the lack of accountability, the lack of effort. I wasn't perfect either. God knows I shut down when I felt attacked. But I was trying to fix things. She just seemed angry at everything. A few weeks later, I suggested marriage counseling. Her reaction was instant and harsh. "So you think I'm the problem?" "No," I said carefully. "I think we have problems we can't solve alone," she scoffed. "I'm not sitting in front of some stranger so they can tell me what's wrong with my marriage." I tried again, explaining that counseling isn't about blame, it's about communication. She cut me off with, "If you need therapy to talk to your wife, maybe you shouldn't be married." That line stuck with me for weeks. We went through this cycle over and over. Me suggesting therapy, her refusing, every time. It ended with her accusing me of trying to fix her or make her the villain. I started walking on eggshells just to keep the peace. The breaking point came one night after dinner. I'd had a long day at work, and she'd been short with me since morning. I tried to sit down and talk about it calmly. She rolled her eyes the entire time I spoke. Finally I said, "Rachel, I'm serious." "We're not okay," she said. "You're being dramatic." "Everyone fights," I told her. "Not like this." "Not every day," she sighed and said. "You're overreacting." "I'm tired of this pity party crap." Something in me just snapped. I stood up and said, "Then I'm done. Either we go to counseling or I file for divorce." She froze. For the first time in months, she actually looked scared. "You're not serious," she said. "I'm dead serious," I replied. "I can't live like this anymore. I love you. But love isn't enough if all we do is hurt each other." She didn't say anything after that, just stared at me, like she didn't recognize the person standing in front of her. That night, I packed a small bag and went to stay with my brother. Nate, he lives about 15 minutes away. When I told him what happened, he said, "I'm proud of you, man. You've been miserable for too long." The next morning, I woke up to a dozen missed calls from Rachel. I ignored them. Later, she sent a long text saying she couldn't believe I was abandoning her, that I was throwing away years of marriage over some arguments. I didn't reply, not immediately anyway. I needed space to think clearly. After a few days, she showed up at Nate's house crying. She said she'd go to counseling. Anything to fix this. I wanted to believe her, but I'd heard similar promises before. Still, I agreed. We started therapy a week later. At first, it was awkward and tense. Rachel would sit with her arms crossed, deflecting questions or twisting my words. The therapist, a kind, calm woman named Dr. Hayes, kept steering us back to communication, she said. "You both need to learn to listen to understand, not just to respond." That line hit me hard, because it was true for both of us. Over time, little by little, the walls started to crack. Rachel admitted that she'd been angry. Not just at me, but at herself. She'd quit her job 2 years ago to start a small business that failed, and she'd never forgiven herself. She said she'd been taking that anger out on me because I was the closest target. Hearing her say that broke something open inside me. I admitted that I'd been emotionally distant too. That sometimes I worked longer hours just to avoid coming home to the tension. That I stopped trying because I felt like I could never say or do the right thing. It wasn't easy. There were tears, defensive moments, even sessions that ended in silence. But there were also breakthroughs. We started communicating again, not perfectly, but honestly, Dr. Hayes gave us homework every week. Write letters to each other without speaking, share one gratitude daily, schedule one non-argument dinner per week. It felt forced at first, but slowly we found small bits of peace. It's been 6 months since we started therapy. We still fight, but not like before. There's less venom in our words, more effort in our apologies. I can finally sit next to Rachel on the couch without feeling like I'm sitting next to a stranger. She told me last week, "I didn't realize how close I was to losing you," I said. "I didn't realize how close I was to losing myself." We're not magically fixed. There's still work to do. Trust to rebuild, resentment to unlearn, but we're trying, really trying. And if I've learned anything, it's that choosing counseling wasn't about saving the marriage. It was about giving both of us a chance to decide if the marriage was worth saving. So yeah, I told my wife it was either counseling or divorce. And for the first time in a long time, it feels like we're finally choosing to fight for each other instead of against each other. Update. It's been almost a year since that night I told Rachel it was counseling or divorce. And I've learned more about love, resentment, and healing in 12 months than in my entire life before that. When I first wrote that post, I was angry, exhausted, and honestly, a little broken. I thought counseling would be the last stop before the end. I wasn't trying to save the marriage. I was trying to see if there was anything left worth saving. And for a while, I really didn't think there was. The first few months of therapy were brutal. Not because of what Rachel said in the sessions, but because of what I had to face about myself. I had gone in thinking she was 90% of the problem. It was easy to see her outbursts, her defensiveness, her anger. Those were obvious. But the therapist pointed out how I had become emotionally unavailable in ways that fed her resentment. I'd stopped engaging when things got hard. I'd shut down, stay silent, go for long drives just to avoid confrontation. I wasn't yelling, but I also wasn't listening. Dr. Hayes said something that stuck with me. Withdrawal is just as destructive as aggression. It's quieter, but it kills connection all the same. Hearing that hit me harder than I expected. I realized I'd been keeping score. Tallying up every hurt, every snide comment, every moment I thought she failed me. And quietly building a wall. Rachel's anger wasn't coming from nowhere. It was coming from a place of being unseen and unheard for too long. That didn't make her behavior okay, but it helped me see that we both had been feeding the same fire. Just from opposite sides, Rachel, to her credit, changed a lot once she actually committed to therapy. It wasn't overnight. There were still bad weeks. Times she'd storm out of the session or spend a day sulking after Dr. Hayes challenged her, but she kept showing up. One session, she admitted something that shocked me. She said, "I used to pick fights just to see if you still cared enough to fight back." I remember sitting there, stunned. "What do you mean?" She looked down and said, "You used to be so passionate. Then you started checking out. The silence scared me more than the yelling, at least when we argued. I knew you still felt something. It wasn't justification. But it was raw honesty. We started peeling back layers like that week after week. Childhood patterns, communication issues, fear of abandonment. All the ugly stuff that couples usually bury until it's too late. Outside of therapy, we began building small, intentional habits. Rachel started cooking again. Something she hadn't done in over a year. I made a rule to leave my phone off after 8 p.m. so we could actually talk instead of zoning out on screens. It felt awkward at first. Like we were roommates trying to learn how to be married again. But slowly it started to feel natural. One Saturday morning, we took a drive to the coast. No plans, no arguing, no heavy talks. Just the two of us, windows down, singing along to old songs. It was the first time in a long time that I looked at her and saw the woman I fell in love with, not the person I'd been fighting against. Things at home got lighter too. Rachel laughed more. She apologized when she slipped up. I did too. The constant tension started to fade, but I'd be lying if I said it was perfect. There were relapses, one night in particular. About 6 months in, we had a massive fight over something small. She made a sarcastic comment about my family. I took it personally, and within minutes it turned into a shouting match. I ended up walking out, slamming the door behind me. I drove around for 2 hours, angry at myself for thinking therapy had fixed us. When I finally came back, she was waiting on the couch. Crying, she said, "I'm sorry, I messed up. But please don't give up on us because of one bad night." That moment felt like a turning point. Before therapy, we would have gone silent for days. This time, we talked. We actually worked through it. Apologized, identified what triggered us, and made a plan to handle it differently next time. Dr. Hayes called that repairing in real time, and she said it's one of the biggest indicators that a relationship is truly healing. Months passed. Rachel started a part-time job at a local marketing firm. She said it made her feel like herself again, like she had purpose outside of us. I noticed she was more confident, less tense, and I was happier too, not just in the marriage, but in my own life. We started having dinners with friends again, going out on weekends, laughing more often than we fought. But the real test came when my brother Nate got divorced. He and his wife, Emily, had a messy split. Lots of anger, betrayal, and years of resentment that never got resolved. I saw so much of us in them that it scared me. One night after hearing about one of their blowouts, I turned to Rachel and said, "That could have been us." She nodded. Quiet for a moment, then said, "It still could be, if we ever stop trying." That line stuck with me because she was right. Marriage isn't something you fix once. It's something you maintain constantly. Like a house. If you stop taking care of it, the cracks always come back. By the time our year anniversary of starting counseling rolled around, Dr. Hayes suggested we move from weekly sessions to monthly check-ins. She said she was proud of how far we'd come, that we weren't just surviving anymore, but actually growing. We celebrated by taking a weekend trip to Nashville, where we'd gone on one of our first dates years ago. We retraced some of our old memories. The diner where she spilled coffee on me, the park where we first talked about getting married, the rooftop bar where we danced like idiots. There was a moment that night, standing under the neon lights, where Rachel took my hand and said, "I don't know how we didn't lose each other completely." And I said, "Maybe we had to almost lose each other to finally understand what we were holding on to." I don't know what the future holds. I'm not naive enough to think we'll never fight again, or that therapy made us invincible. But I do know this. Walking away that night, giving that ultimatum, was the best thing I ever did. It wasn't cruel, it was honest. Sometimes love means saying, "This isn't working, and something has to change." Because if you don't draw that line, resentment will. Now, a year later, I can finally say we're in a good place. Not perfect, not storybook, but real. And for the first time in a long time, I feel peace when I come home. I look at Rachel, and she looks back. And we both know how close we came to losing everything. And maybe that's what keeps us grounded. The memory of how bad it got, and the relief of knowing we chose to fight through it together. Final update. It's been almost 3 years since the night I told Rachel it was either counseling or divorce. And I can finally write this update with a kind of clarity I never had before. The kind that only comes after you've lived through the storm, come out the other side, and had enough quiet time to actually reflect. So much has changed since that night. Some of it for the better, some of it not in ways I expected, but all of it real. After my last update, Rachel and I had settled into a rhythm. Therapy was going well, communication had improved, and for the first time in years, our house didn't feel like a war zone. There were nights filled with laughter again. We cooked together, planned trips, even started talking about getting a dog. It finally felt like we'd rebuilt something worth protecting. But relationships, especially ones that have been fractured, don't heal in straight lines. They ebb and flow. The first sign that something was changing came a few months after our Nashville trip. Rachel started getting restless again. She'd been working part-time at that marketing firm, but they offered her a full-time position that would mean long hours and occasional travel. She wanted to take it. I was proud of her. I knew how much that job meant to her. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. We'd spent so long learning how to stay connected, and now we were going to be back in separate worlds. Still, I told her, "Go for it. You deserve this." She smiled, kissed me, and said, "Thank you for believing in me." At first, things were fine, but over time her hours grew longer. She was gone before I woke up and came home late. Exhausted, some nights she didn't come home at all, staying overnight at client events or in hotels near the office. I didn't want to be the controlling husband, so I didn't say much. I told myself she was chasing her dream, but slowly the distance between us grew again. She wasn't angry this time, just absent. When we did talk, it was surface level, how work was, what bills were due, what we should pick up from the store. The intimacy faded without either of us meaning for it to. One night, I brought it up gently. I said, "I feel like we're slipping again." She sighed and said, "I'm just tired, okay? Can we not do this right now?" And in that moment, I felt that old ache again. The one I'd felt before counseling, before everything. That sense of talking to someone who wasn't really listening. It didn't explode into a fight this time. It was quieter, like a slow fade-out. We kept going through the motions. Date nights, therapy check-ins, weekend plans. But there was a hollow feeling underneath it all. I thought maybe it was just stress, that it would pass once she adjusted to her job. Then, about a year ago, I found something that shattered me all over again. Rachel had left her laptop open on the kitchen table. I wasn't snooping, but a message popped up, a text from a coworker named Eric. The preview said, "Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you." My stomach dropped. I clicked the message thread, heart pounding. There were dozens of texts, flirty ones, intimate ones, and one picture I'll never forget, her hand holding his, taken in some hotel room I'd never seen. I just sat there, staring at the screen, feeling like my world had split open. When Rachel got home that night, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just asked, "Who's Eric?" The look on her face told me everything. She broke down immediately, said it wasn't what I thought, that it just happened, that she didn't mean for it to go that far. She swore it was only physical once, but the messages said otherwise. I listened quietly. Then I said something I never thought I'd say again. "I think we're done." She begged me not to leave, said she'd quit her job, go back to therapy, do whatever it took. But the truth was, I couldn't do it anymore. Not after everything we'd fought to rebuild. Not after I'd already chosen to stay once. The next few months were a blur. We went through the motions of separation, dividing finances, selling the house, telling our families. She moved out first. I stayed behind to handle paperwork. I tried not to hate her, and honestly, I don't think I ever did. Hate would have been easier than the sadness. We finalized the divorce 6 months later. It was amicable, at least on paper. She kept saying, "I'm so sorry," and I'd just nod because what else was there to say? In the months since, I've had to rebuild my life from scratch. I moved into a smaller apartment closer to my job. Got a dog, a golden retriever named Scout. Because the silence was unbearable at first. Started running again. I've reconnected with friends I'd drifted from. And here's the strange part. I'm okay, better than okay, some days. Therapy didn't save our marriage in the long run, but it saved me. It forced me to confront who I was. The parts of myself I'd neglected. The ways I avoided hard truths, and for that, I'll always be grateful. Rachel and I haven't spoken much since the divorce. Every now and then, she'll send a text asking how I'm doing. I keep it polite but distant. She told me she's seeing someone new, not Eric, thankfully, and that she's trying to live differently. I hope she means it. Last month, I ran into Dr. Hayes at a coffee shop. She recognized me immediately and smiled. I told her what had happened, and she listened without judgment, like she always did. When I finished, she said something that stuck with me. Sometimes healing together is only meant to take you as far as you need to go to heal yourself. I think that's what Rachel and I were. A lesson in growth that couldn't last forever, but was still worth learning. So was I wrong to give her that ultimatum years ago? No, it was the first time I stood up for my own peace. And even though it didn't end in the fairy tale I hoped for, it led me somewhere much more honest. Now, when I come home from work, Scout greets me at the door. The apartment smells like coffee and cedarwood. There's no shouting, no tension, just quiet. I still catch myself setting an extra plate at the table sometimes, out of habit, but the ache that used to come with it has softened into something else. Gratitude. Because I know I gave it everything I could. And maybe that's what love really is sometimes. Knowing when to fight for it, and knowing when to let it go. So yeah, it's over. But for the first time in years, I finally feel whole. And that to me is the real ending. Stories number 2. My boyfriend accused me of sabotaging his sleep schedule. I, 27F, live with my boyfriend, Nate, 29M, and we've been together for almost 2 years. We moved in together 6 months ago, and honestly, I thought it was going to be amazing. I was wrong in ways I didn't expect. It started small. Nate has a weird sleep schedule because he works for a logistics company that sometimes requires late-night calls or super early morning shifts. He's always been kind of a heavy sleeper, like really heavy. I used to joke that a tornado siren couldn't wake him up. At first it was funny, but then it became my job to wake him up. When we moved in together, Nate asked if I could help him stay on track since he was missing alarms and getting in trouble at work. I agreed, thinking I'd just nudge him a few times in the morning. No big deal, right? Except, it wasn't just the mornings. He'd set multiple alarms throughout the night for check-ins or reminders, and when they went off, I'd have to wake him up because he'd sleep right through them. At first, I did it. Every time an alarm went off, I'd nudge him, "Babe, wake up." Sometimes he'd mumble, "Roll over," or shut it off without doing anything. Then another alarm would go off 20 minutes later. I'd wake him again, over and over. There were nights where I got maybe 2 hours of actual sleep. After a few weeks, I told him I couldn't keep doing this. I was exhausted, cranky, and falling asleep at work. He promised he'd get better at waking himself up. Spoiler, he didn't. He kept setting alarms, sleeping through them, and expecting me to handle it. Then came the night that broke me. It was a Tuesday, and I had an early client presentation the next morning. I told him clearly, "Please, handle your alarms tonight. I need to sleep." He said he would. At 1:30 a.m., his first alarm went off. Loud, he didn't move. I shook him gently. Nothing. I raised my voice. "Nate, alarm." Still nothing. Finally, I shoved his shoulder hard enough to wake him. He sat up, bleary-eyed, muttered something about checking an email, then fell right back asleep, alarm still blaring. I had to turn it off myself. Then, at 2:15, another alarm, then 3, then 4. I tried waking him the first couple of times, but by 4 a.m. I was done. I put in earplugs, turned away, and went back to sleep. The next morning, he overslept and was late to work by almost an hour. When he got home that evening, he was furious. He accused me of being selfish and said I knew how important his job was. He told me I sabotaged him by not waking him up like I always did. I was honestly stunned. I reminded him that it wasn't my job to make sure he got up. I told him I'd been losing sleep for weeks because of his constant alarms. He said, "That's what partners do, you help each other? But where's the help for me? I've been running on fumes trying to hold down my own job while managing his sleep schedule like some kind of personal assistant." I told him I wasn't his mother, and if he couldn't wake up to his own alarms, maybe he needed to talk to a doctor about a sleep issue. He didn't take that well. He slept on the couch that night and barely spoke to me the next day. Since then, he's been passive-aggressive, slamming things, making comments like, "Guess I better not expect help around here." I've tried to explain that I'm not refusing to help him out of spite, but because it's literally ruining my health, I can't keep being the reason he wakes up on time. He said if I really cared, I'd make the sacrifice. It's honestly made me question everything, like, am I wrong for drawing a line here? I love Nate, but this isn't sustainable. I feel like I'm dating a grown man who refuses to take basic responsibility for himself. Last night, I didn't wake him again. His alarms went off 5 times between midnight and 6 a.m., and he missed every single one. He was late, again, and gave me the coldest look before leaving. I feel guilty, but I also feel weirdly relieved. I finally slept through the night. Maybe that says everything I need to know. Update. My boyfriend accused me of sabotaging his sleep schedule. It's been about 3 weeks since I posted, and a lot has happened. I didn't expect so many people to respond to my story, and I've read every single comment, even the harsh ones. Honestly, I needed that wake-up call. Pun intended. After I posted, things between Nate and me got even more tense. For the first few days, we barely spoke. He acted cold and distant, and I was walking on eggshells trying not to trigger another argument. But it didn't take long before the alarms became an issue again. One night, he came into the bedroom holding his phone and said, "I've got an early call at 5. Just nudge me when it rings," I told him calmly. "No, Nate, I'm not doing this anymore." He rolled his eyes and muttered something about me being dramatic. But I stood my ground. I even handed him one of those vibrating alarm wristbands I ordered online after reading some advice from commenters. I said, "Here, try this, it might help." He refused, flat out. Said it was stupid and that he didn't need gadgets for babies. I just went to bed. That night, his alarms went off, loudly, as usual, and he slept through all of them. I didn't move, I had my earplugs in, white noise playing, and for once, I didn't feel guilty when he woke up late again. He stomped around the apartment, slammed drawers, and muttered under his breath the entire morning. Later that day, he texted me from work. "You really don't care about me, do you?" That text hit hard. I stared at it for a long time before replying, "I care, but I'm not your alarm clock. This isn't fair to me." He didn't respond for hours. When he finally came home, he was quiet, and I thought maybe he'd cooled off. But then he said something that changed everything. He told me his boss had written him up again for lateness, and that he was probably going to lose his job. Then he looked right at me and said, "You could have prevented this if you just cared enough to help me." That was the moment something snapped inside me. I realized that this wasn't about alarms. It was about control, blame, and emotional manipulation. I wasn't failing him. He was refusing to take accountability. I told him point blank that I was done being his caretaker. I said, "You're almost 30, Nate. If you can't wake yourself up, you need to see a doctor or find another system. But I'm not sacrificing my health anymore." He just stared at me. And for a second, I saw this flash of anger in his face that scared me a little. He didn't yell, but his voice went low. "You think you're better than me, huh? Because you can wake up to a stupid alarm?" I told him it wasn't about that, but he didn't listen. He stormed out and stayed at his friend's place for 2 nights. I used that time to actually sleep. It was the first time in months I didn't wake up exhausted or anxious. I realized how peaceful my apartment felt without the tension and constant alarms. When he came back, he seemed calmer. He apologized, sort of. He said he'd been under pressure and just needed help. I told him I understood, but that he couldn't put that burden on me anymore. I also told him that if things didn't change, I couldn't stay in this relationship. He nodded and said he'd figure something out. For a few days, he did better. He started setting fewer alarms and even tried going to bed earlier, but it didn't last. Last week, I came home from work and found him asleep on the couch, phone in hand, alarms queued up for the night. I didn't even argue. I went straight to the bedroom, shut the door, and put in my earplugs. At 2 a.m. I woke up, not because of an alarm, but because Nate was standing beside the bed shaking my shoulder. He looked half asleep and said, "Hey, your turn to wake me." I sat up, completely stunned. "What are you talking about?" He said, "I set alarms, but I turned them off so they wouldn't bother you. Just wake me every 2 hours." I actually laughed. Not out of humor, out of disbelief, I said, "No, Nate." "Absolutely not," he sighed, muttered, "Unbelievable," and walked out. That morning, he overslept again, and left the apartment slamming the door so hard that one of the picture frames fell off the wall. I just sat there staring at it, realizing this relationship had turned into something that made me dread going to bed. I talked to my sister about everything, and she said something that stuck with me. You're not supposed to lose sleep, literally and emotionally, over someone who won't take responsibility for their own life. That same night, I started packing a few of my things. Not everything. Just enough for a break. I told Nate I was going to stay at my sister's place for a while. He didn't say anything, just stared at me, then turned away. I've been at my sister's for almost a week now, and I can't even explain the difference. I'm sleeping through the night. I'm eating better. My headaches are gone. Nate texted me twice since I left. Once to say he hopes I'm happy ruining his life, and another time to ask if I'd come back when he figures things out. I haven't replied, because for the first time in months, I'm actually rested. And I think that says everything I need to know about whether I should go back. Final update. My boyfriend accused me of sabotaging his sleep schedule. It's been almost 2 months since my last update, and I can officially say this chapter of my life is over. And not in the way I once feared. Writing this feels surreal, because if you told me a year ago that I'd end things over something as small as alarms, I'd have laughed, but now I realize it was never about alarms. It was about respect, responsibility, and the kind of peace I was slowly losing without even noticing. After I stayed at my sister's place, I went completely no contact with Nate for about 3 weeks. He sent a few guilt-tripping messages at first, things like, "I can't sleep without you," and, "I guess it's easy for you to give up on people." I ignored them. Then the tone shifted. He started apologizing, saying he realized how much pressure he'd put on me, and that he wanted to work on himself. Part of me wanted to believe him. We shared nearly 2 years together, and not all of it was bad. When we first met, Nate was funny, ambitious, and attentive. I fell for the version of him that used to cook me breakfast on Sundays and walk me to my car in the rain. But somewhere along the line, that version disappeared. The alarms were just a symptom of something bigger. How he expected me to fix everything for him. After a few weeks, I agreed to meet up for coffee. Public place, neutral ground, When I got there, he looked tired, not just physically, but worn down. He said he'd been seeing a sleep specialist because one of his co-workers suggested he might have something called delayed sleep phase syndrome. I was glad he was getting help, but then he said, "I wish you'd been more patient while I figured that out." That line made my stomach twist, because even in his apology, he was still blaming me. Like my lack of patience was the problem, not his refusal to listen when I begged him for months to take this seriously. I told him I was happy he was getting help, but I wasn't coming back. He tried to talk me out of it, said he could make things right, and that we could start fresh. But the truth is, once you experience peace after living in constant exhaustion, you can't go back to chaos. I told him I didn't want to spend my nights managing someone else's choices, and he didn't say much after that. Just stared at his coffee, nodded once, and said, "I guess this is it then." It was after that meeting. I went home feeling a weird mix of sadness and relief. I didn't cry though. I thought I would, but I didn't. I think I'd already mourned the relationship during all those sleepless nights. A few weeks later, I got an email from Nate, a long one. He said he'd been officially diagnosed with a sleep disorder, and that he'd started therapy for underlying anxiety. He also admitted he used me as a crutch instead of facing his problems. It wasn't a plea to get back together. It actually sounded like genuine accountability. I wished him well and told him I was glad he was finally taking care of himself. That was the last time we spoke. Since then, I've moved into a new apartment. It's small, quiet, and mine. I got a cheap little coffee maker that beeps softly in the morning. And the funny thing is, that gentle beep used to trigger this muscle memory of panic. Like I had to wake someone up, but now it's just background noise. I wake up naturally, stretch, and make breakfast without worrying about someone else's schedule. My sister jokes that I look 5 years younger. And honestly, I feel like it. I started going to yoga. I read before bed, and I don't need earplugs anymore. The silence that used to feel empty now feels safe. Sometimes, late at night, I think about all the tiny moments that built up to that breaking point. The alarms, the arguments, the resentment. I used to think love meant doing everything for someone, even at the cost of yourself. Now I know real love doesn't ask you to destroy your own peace, just to keep someone else comfortable. The last thing Nate said to me that day in the coffee shop was, "You'll find someone who doesn't need you to wake them up." It was meant as a bitter jab, but it ended up being the truest thing he's ever said. Because I will, and next time, I won't mistake caretaking for love. So yeah, I guess that's my closure. I didn't get the fairy tale ending. No big reconciliation, no dramatic realization that fixed everything, just a quiet, steady peace that came after a storm I never should have been standing in to begin with. And now, every night before I fall asleep, I whisper something small to myself. Not out of habit, but as a promise. You don't have to wake anyone up but yourself. Stories number 3. My dad moved on too fast when my mom passed away. I was 15, cancer. It happened so fast that my brain still refuses to fully process it. 1 week she was weak but joking with me about prom. And a few months later I was watching nurses adjust tubes and hearing beeping machines that stopped too soon. The silence in that hospital room was louder than anything I'd ever heard. After the funeral, my dad, Tom, went quiet. I tried to be understanding because everyone grieves differently. But he stopped talking about Mom altogether. Her pictures disappeared from the living room. Her clothes were gone by the time school started that fall. I remember opening her closet and just standing there, staring at the empty hangers, wondering when that had happened. At first, I assumed he donated them because it hurt too much to see them. But then, not even a year later, he started seeing someone. I overheard it when he was on the phone with his sister, my Aunt Lydia. I didn't confront him. I just sat in my room and felt this weird mix of anger and guilt. Angry that he was already dating. Guilty that I didn't want him to be happy yet. Her name was Carrie. She was friendly, loud, always smiling in a way that felt too practiced. She baked cookies when she came over and tried to bond with me. But I couldn't stand it. It wasn't her fault. But she felt like an intruder in a house that was still half my mom's. When I was 16, they moved in together. That was when things got worse. Dad seemed desperate to pretend our life had reset. He redecorated, painted the walls, replaced the couch Mom picked out, and even suggested we sell the house eventually because it holds too many memories. That line broke me. Too many memories? That was the point. Carrie started calling me sweetheart. She'd make comments like, "Your mom would want you to be happy for us." I don't think she meant harm, but every time she said, "your mom," I felt something sharp in my chest. When I turned 17, I caught her crying in the kitchen. She'd had a miscarriage, and Dad was comforting her. I felt bad for her in that moment, genuinely. But what hit me harder was realizing how fast he'd tried to start a new family. Less than 2 years after Mom's funeral, he was trying for another kid by the time I was 18. Carrie was pregnant again. This time it stuck. I was finishing my senior year, trying to keep my grades up, and just waiting for the clock to hit midnight on my birthday, because the second I turned 18, I was leaving. Dad thought I was joking when I told him. We were sitting at dinner, Carrie talking about nursery colors. I said, "When I turn 18, I'm moving out." He looked up like I'd said I was joining the circus. Then he laughed and said, Sure. We'll talk about it." We didn't talk about it again until my birthday. That morning, he handed me a small box. Inside was a necklace. "It was your mom's," he said. "I saved it for when you became an adult," I thanked him. Genuinely. It was one of the few pieces of her I had left. Then I told him I'd already found a place to stay. My best friend Eric's parents had agreed to let me rent their basement for cheap while I started community college. Dad froze. Carrie looked confused. "You're serious?" he said. "Yeah," I said. "I've been serious for months." He followed me to my room while I packed. We didn't yell, but the tension was suffocating. He said I was running away, that I was punishing him for moving on. I said I wasn't punishing him. I just couldn't pretend everything was fine. He said he deserved happiness, and I agreed. But I told him I needed space from the version of him that buried Mom twice. Once in the ground and once in the house. I left that afternoon with 2 duffel bags and the necklace. He didn't stop me, but he didn't hug me either. That was 6 months ago. I've been doing okay. Classes, part-time job at a bookstore, quiet evenings where I can breathe. Dad texts sometimes. Mostly short things like, "Hope you're eating," or "Baby's due next month." I haven't responded to all of them. When I did reply, I kept it polite. A few weeks ago, Aunt Lydia called to tell me Dad's new baby was born. A girl. They named her Elise. Apparently Carrie had a rough delivery, and everyone was worried for a bit. But they're both fine now. I saw the pictures on Facebook. Dad looked happy, really happy. I wanted to hate it, but instead I just felt nothing. Like I'd finally run out of space for emotions about him. Still, part of me wonders if I'm being unfair. Maybe I'm stuck in grief that he managed to move through faster. Maybe he really did love Mom and just didn't know how to survive without someone. But I can't forget how easily he erased her from our life. How her memory became something inconvenient to him. People keep telling me time will soften things, that I'll come around, that one day I'll be ready to meet my baby sister, maybe. But right now, I still can't look at pictures of that house without feeling like my mom's ghost is watching a stranger rock a new baby in her living room. I don't know if that makes me cold or broken. I just know that when I blew out my candles on my 18th birthday, I didn't wish for forgiveness or closure. I wished that I'd finally stop missing someone who isn't coming back. Update: it's been about a year since I moved out. I didn't plan on writing anything. But so much has changed that keeping it all bottled up feels worse than just saying it. I'm 19 now, working full-time at the bookstore while taking a few classes. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. I pay rent, cook my own meals, and for the first time, I feel like my choices belong to me. For a while, I didn't talk to my dad at all. Every time his name popped up on my phone, I'd feel this mix of guilt and resentment, so I'd just ignore it. He stopped texting for a bit after Elise was born. I think he realized I needed distance, but it still hurt to see that he could move on so easily. Then, about 3 months ago, Aunt Lydia called again. She said Dad had been asking about me a lot, and that Carrie wanted to invite me over for dinner. Just to talk. My first reaction was no. I didn't want to see the nursery, or hold the baby, or sit across from people who replaced my mom in every visible way, but Lydia made me feel guilty, saying Dad missed me, and that Elise deserved to know her sister someday. So after a few weeks of thinking about it, I said yes when I pulled into the driveway. Everything looked different. The front yard had been landscaped, new paint on the shutters. Even the mailbox had their names stenciled on it. Tom and Carrie Reynolds. I remember standing there with my hands shaking, feeling like I was visiting a stranger's house instead of the one I grew up in. Dad opened the door before I even knocked. He looked older than I remembered. Tired, gray at the edges. But when he saw me, he smiled in a way that made me pause. It wasn't forced. He hugged me right away, and for a few seconds, I let him. Then Carrie appeared holding Elise. The baby was about 8 months old. all soft cheeks and dark curls. She looked nothing like Mom or me, which helped, oddly. Carrie asked if I wanted to hold her, and before I could come up with an excuse, Dad was already nodding. Like he didn't want to make it awkward, so I did. And that little girl just stared at me like she was trying to figure out who I was. I don't know what I expected. Resentment, maybe. But instead, I just felt calm. Like she was too new to carry any of the weight that the rest of us did. Dinner was awkward but civil. Carrie tried too hard. But I appreciated that she was making an effort. Dad kept asking about school and work. He told me how proud he was that I was managing on my own, when I told him about the bookstore. He got quiet for a second and said Mom would have loved that. That was the first time he'd said her name to me in almost 3 years. I froze. I didn't know how to respond, but hearing him say it, it hit me hard. After dinner, he asked me to stay for a bit longer. Carrie took Elise upstairs and we sat in the living room. He said, "I know I moved too fast. I know you felt like I erased your mom. You're not wrong. I didn't say anything at first." He rubbed his face like he was trying to wipe away the last few years. He told me he'd gone to therapy after I left, that Carrie pushed him to do it because he'd started shutting down again. He said he realized he'd rushed into a new relationship because he was terrified of being alone. Then he said something that caught me off guard. "I should have grieved with you instead of around you." That was the first time I cried in front of him since Mom's funeral. I didn't realize how much I'd been waiting to hear that. He apologized for redecorating the house so quickly, for packing away Mom's things without asking me first. He said he kept some of her stuff in the attic, photo albums, letters, her jewelry box, and that if I wanted them, they were mine. We spent the rest of the evening going through them together. There were things I hadn't seen in years. Mom's old Polaroids, birthday cards she'd written, a few drawings I made as a kid that she'd saved. It felt like finding pieces of her again. Since that night, I've been visiting more often. Not a lot, but enough. I help watch Elise sometimes. She's starting to say words now. Dada, book, ball. When she sees me, she just lights up and crawls over as fast as she can. It's hard to hold resentment in the same arms that hold her. Carrie's still trying to find her place with me. We're not close, but I can tell she cares about Dad and Elise. She's not my mom, and she knows she never will be, which honestly makes it easier to like her. Dad's different now, too. He talks about Mom sometimes, not like a wound, but like a memory that still matters. He told me he took down the family portraits they did after Elise was born, and replaced them with ones that include photos of Mom, too. It's all part of the same story, he said. I'm not sure we'll ever be what we were before, but we're trying. It feels less like pretending and more like rebuilding. The other night, after dinner, Dad asked if I'd come over for Christmas. I hesitated, then said yes. He looked so relieved. I'm still figuring out how to balance it all. The grief, the new family, the guilt for holding on too long. But I think for the first time, I'm not angry anymore. I still miss my mom every day. But it doesn't feel like I have to protect her memory by shutting everyone else out. I think she'd want me to stop surviving and start living again. And maybe finally that's what I'm doing. Final update? It's been almost 3 years since I left home. And honestly, I didn't think I'd ever write again. But something happened recently that made me realize how far things have come, and how grief changes shape but never really disappears. I'm 21 now. I finished community college and transferred to a university about 2 hours away. I'm majoring in English, minoring in psychology, I think, deep down. I want to be a counselor someday. Maybe because I've seen how silence eats at people when they don't deal with loss, or maybe because I don't want anyone else to feel as alone as I did. My relationship with Dad is better than I ever imagined it could be. We talk almost every week now. Sometimes it's just a text or a phone call, but it feels real. He still gets emotional when he brings up Mom, and that used to make me uncomfortable. But now it feels honest. Like we've finally stopped pretending to be fine. Carrie and I are civil, maybe even friendly. I still wouldn't call her stepmom, but she's good to Dad, and she loves Elise. And she's been nothing but kind to me, even when I didn't make it easy for her. One time, when I visited during spring break, she left a little care package in my car before I left. Snacks for the drive, gas money tucked into an envelope, and a note that just said, "Thank you for giving Tom a chance to be your dad again." That one hit me hard. As for Elise, God, that kid owns my heart. She's 2 now. Talking in little sentences and running around like she's training for a marathon. She calls me Lissy because Melissa is still too hard for her to say. Every time I visit, she drags me by the hand to show me her toys, and then insists I sit next to her during dinner. It's impossible to look at her and still feel angry about the past. But here's where things got complicated again. About 2 months ago, Dad called me out of nowhere. His voice sounded shaky, and for a second, I thought something happened to Elise. But then he said, "It's me, I'm okay. But I need to tell you something." He'd been diagnosed with a mild heart condition. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but serious enough that he'd have to change his diet, start medication, and take things easy. He tried to sound upbeat, but I could hear the fear under his words, and in that moment, every piece of resentment I'd ever held toward him vanished. Because all I could think was, I can't lose another parent. Not yet. I drove home that weekend. It was strange walking back into that house again, but it didn't feel like an intrusion anymore. It felt like family. The walls were different colors. The pictures were new, but there was warmth. Dad hugged me like he didn't want to let go. We sat on the porch after Elise went to bed. He told me he's been scared of dying ever since Mom passed, and that it made him rush into everything, remarriage, another baby, pretending everything was fine. He said, "I thought if I could fill the house, it would stop feeling empty." I told him I understood. Because now I really do. We talked for hours about Mom, about what kind of person she was, about how she used to hum when she cooked, and how she always made fun of Dad for watching bad sci-fi movies. I told him I still have the necklace he gave me on my 18th birthday, and I wear it whenever I need to feel grounded. Before I left, he said something I'll never forget. "I wish I'd been brave enough to grieve with you instead of after you. That's the thing I've learned. Grief doesn't get smaller. Life just gets bigger around it." Now when I visit, Elise calls me her big sissy. Carrie makes my favorite lasagna, and Dad sits with us at the table telling stories about when I was her age. There's still a shadow in that house, but it's softer now. It doesn't choke me anymore. Last weekend, I went with them to the cemetery for the first time since I was a teenager. We brought flowers, white lilies, Mom's favorite. Elise didn't understand where we were, but she picked a dandelion and said, "This one's pretty too," and laid it next to the bouquet. It was small and innocent, but somehow it felt perfect. After we left, Dad asked if I wanted to stop by the park nearby, the same one where Mom used to take me when I was little. We sat on a bench, watching Elise toddle around. For a while we didn't talk. Then he said quietly, "I think she'd be proud of us." And for the first time in years, I agreed. So yeah, I guess that's the end of this chapter. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not broken. I still miss my mom every single day, but I can finally look at the life that's grown around her absence and see something beautiful. I used to think leaving home on my 18th birthday was about running away from pain. Now I realize it was about giving myself the space to find peace. And somehow, against all odds, I did. Stories number 4. I made my friends pay for their dinner, even though I could have gotten it for free. I never thought something as simple as a dinner bill could make me question my friendships. But here we are. It's been almost a month since the night it happened, and I'm still catching side glances, subtle comments, and a whole lot of awkward energy from people I thought I knew. So, here's what went down. I work at a really nice restaurant in downtown Denver. Upscale, trendy. One of those places where the lighting is soft, the cocktails cost way too much, and people post their food before eating it. I've been there for almost 2 years, working my way from busser to server, and I actually like my job. The staff is tight-knit, the tips are good, and management treats us well. Plus, my manager, Jeff, is the kind of guy who looks out for his team. If you put in effort, he'll have your back. Now, the perk of working at a place like that is we occasionally get employee comps. Free or discounted meals if we're eating off the clock. But that's not something we can just hand out to our friends whenever we want. It's meant for staff only. If I want to bring a few people in, I can sometimes ask Jeff for a favor. But he has to approve it ahead of time. There are rules. Since it's a high-end place and comps cut into profits, a couple weeks ago, my friends wanted to celebrate a few big things. My buddy Jake had just gotten promoted. Our friend Morgan was moving to Chicago, and I'd finally paid off my car. So we decided to have a nice dinner together instead of doing the usual pizza and beer thing. When they asked where we should go, Morgan said, "Why don't we go to that place you work?" I've been dying to try it. At first I hesitated. It's not really a casual hangout spot, and I knew the prices would sting a little, but they insisted, saying they wanted to support my workplace and get the full experience. I warned them right away. "Just so you guys know, I can't comp everything. I might be able to get a discount, but I'll have to check." Everyone said they understood. The night of the dinner, there were 6 of us. Me, Jake, Morgan, our mutual friend Lydia, her boyfriend Chris, and another guy from our friend group named Devin, They were all in good spirits, dressed up, and excited to be there. When we got to the restaurant, I introduced them to a few coworkers and made sure they got a good table. I wasn't working that night, but Jeff happened to be managing, so I went to say hi. He asked who I was with, and I told him the situation. He said, "I can comp your meal, but not the whole table. That'd be pushing it." I said that was totally fine and thanked him. I didn't even ask for more because, honestly, I didn't want to take advantage. Dinner went great. Everyone loved the food. The steak, the seafood, the desserts, everything. The drinks were flowing. The conversation was good, and it genuinely felt like one of those perfect nights out you wish you could freeze. Then came the bill. As expected, it was hefty. Around $480 with drinks and tax. When the server dropped it off, Jake immediately looked at me and said, "So, what's the damage after your discount?" I hesitated and said, there's no discount." Jeff could only comp my meal. They all just stared at me for a second. Lydia blinked. "Wait, you mean we have to pay full price?" I nodded. "Yeah, that's how it works. I told you guys I'd try to get a discount, but it's not guaranteed," Jake laughed, like he thought I was joking. "Come on, man, you work here. You could have gotten us a deal," I sighed. "It doesn't work like that, Jake. It's a business. I can't just comp people because they're my friends." That's when things started getting tense. Morgan frowned and said, "You literally work here. They wouldn't even know if you just asked to take it off the bill." I shook my head. Actually, they would. Every comp has to go through management and be approved. If I did that without permission, I could lose my job, Devin chimed in. "Dude, that's messed up. We came here to support you, and now we're dropping like $80 each." "That stung," I said. "I didn't force anyone to come here. I told you it was expensive." Lydia crossed her arms. "Yeah, but we thought you'd hook us up a little. I mean, what's the point of having a friend who works at a nice restaurant if we're paying full price like strangers?" I could feel my face getting hot. "The point is that I like my job and don't want to risk it to save you a few bucks," Jake muttered. "Guess loyalty only goes one way." That hit harder than I expected. At that point, I'd had enough. I pulled out my card and said, "Fine. I'll cover my meal and part of the tip. You guys can split the rest however you want." Then I got up, went to the bathroom, and just stood there for a few minutes trying to calm down. When I came back, everyone was quiet. They paid the bill. No one said much after that. We left shortly after, and the whole night that started out so fun ended with awkward goodbyes in the parking lot. The next day, I checked my phone and saw a message from Jake that said, "You really couldn't just comp it? You've worked there forever? Would have been nice to feel appreciated after all the times I've covered you." I didn't reply. A few hours later, Morgan texted, "I still can't believe we paid $80 each. That's crazy. You could have talked to your boss or something." Again, I didn't respond. Lydia unfollowed me on Instagram the next day. Over the next week, things just got worse. The group chat went silent. Invitations to hang out stopped. The few times I saw them around, it was clear there was tension. Even Devin made some passive-aggressive comment at a mutual friend's barbecue about how I sold out for my fancy restaurant job. I talked to Jeff about it, half-jokingly, and he said, "If your friends can't respect your job boundaries, they're not really friends." He's probably right, but it still hurts. It's not about the money. They could afford the dinner. It's about the assumption that I owed them something, that because I work in hospitality, I should bend rules and risk my job to make them happy. I've had plenty of coworkers fired for abusing comps. Jeff's a good manager, but even he has limits. I wasn't about to put my career in jeopardy over a free meal. The sad thing is, if they just asked ahead of time, I would have tried to get a group discount through the proper channels, but they didn't want me to ask. They wanted me to break the rules for them. I've been replaying that night a lot lately. The laughter, the way it shifted so quickly. I keep thinking about how easily people's perception of you can change when you stop giving them what they expect. Jake and I used to talk every day. We haven't spoken since that dinner. Morgan left for Chicago without saying goodbye. Lydia blocked me after I posted a photo with new coworkers. Devin just ignores me when I see him at the gym. It's weird. You spend years building friendships, thinking you know people, and then one night exposes everything. The thing is, I'm not sorry. I did the right thing. Maybe I could have smoothed things over better, explained more, or tried harder to make them understand. But at the end of the day, I'm not responsible for their entitlement. I showed up, celebrated their milestones, and paid for my share. I didn't cheat them, lie to them, or embarrass anyone. All I did was respect my workplace boundaries, and somehow, that made me the bad guy. So yeah, maybe I lost a few friends, but honestly, If someone's friendship depends on how much free stuff you can get them, maybe it was never a friendship worth keeping. Still, I'd be lying if I said it doesn't sting walking into that restaurant sometimes, remembering that table, that laughter that soured into silence, and realizing that a single dinner was all it took to show me who my real friends weren't. I guess the real price that night wasn't the bill. It was the lesson. Update. So, a lot has happened since that dinner night blew up in my face. I didn't expect the fallout to last as long as it did. But here we are, almost 2 months later, and things are only just starting to settle. After I made the original post, I kind of avoided the group chat for a while. I figured everyone needed to cool off. But the silence dragged longer than I thought it would. Nobody reached out for nearly a week, which was unusual since we usually texted every other day about sports, random memes, or weekend plans. When I finally checked, the chat was still quiet, no jokes, no invitations, just dead space. A few days later, I got a message from Jake asking if we could talk. I agreed, and we met up at a coffee shop near his office. I could tell from the second he walked in that he was tense. He didn't even crack his usual sarcastic smile. He got straight to the point. "Man, I'm not mad about paying for dinner. I'm mad about how you handled it." That threw me for a loop because I genuinely didn't think I'd handled anything wrong. But then he explained that it wasn't really about the money. It was about pride. Apparently, when I mentioned the free meal thing at the table, it made them feel like I was trying to prove I had some kind of inside connection that they didn't. Jake said it made the whole table uncomfortable. Like I was putting them in a weird spot between being freeloaders or paying customers. I hadn't even thought about it like that. I told him that wasn't my intention at all. That I'd only mentioned it because I didn't want them to assume I'd covered the meal later. But perception matters. And I realized I'd made the situation look worse by saying something halfway through dinner, instead of just staying quiet and sorting it privately. After that talk, things thawed a little between me and Jake, but the others were still distant. I reached out to everyone else in the group separately. Sam, Tyler, and Rachel. I apologized to each of them individually, explained what happened from my side, and clarified that I wasn't trying to flex or guilt trip them. Tyler was chill about it and said he didn't care as much as the others did. But Rachel told me straight up that she thought I'd been stingy. That stung more than I expected. The thing is, Rachel and I have known each other the longest, since college, and I've covered her meals before when she forgot her card or had money issues. I reminded her of that, not to guilt her, but just to point out that it wasn't like I'd suddenly turned into some petty accountant overnight. She sighed and said she got it now, but it still rubbed her the wrong way. Eventually, the group started hanging out again, but it was different. The vibe wasn't as easygoing, at least for a while. We met for drinks one night, and nobody brought up the restaurant incident directly, but there was this unspoken tension in the air, like everyone was trying not to mention it. It wasn't until a few weeks later, when we were out for burgers, that Jake joked, "Don't worry guys, I'm not calling in any favors this time." Everyone laughed, including me, and that kind of broke the ice. Since then, I've learned to keep some things to myself. I still have that same restaurant hookup, but I don't mention it anymore, and if I use it, I make sure it's not with close friends who might take it the wrong way. I realize that sometimes generosity or access can look like showing off, even when you mean well. What's funny is that after all the drama, the restaurant's owner, the guy who offered me the free meal, heard about the situation through a mutual friend. He texted me saying, "Next time just bring them in. I'll take care of it. No explanations needed." That message made me laugh because it was so simple. If I'd just accepted that in the first place, the whole awkward mess might have been avoided. Since then, things between me and my friends have gone back to normal. Mostly, we joke about it now. Sometimes if we're out and the bill comes, Tyler will say, "So, you got a discount here too? Or should we all Venmo?" It's become a running gag, which honestly feels like a relief after how tense things were. I think the whole situation taught me something important about pride, both theirs and mine. I thought I was being fair, but I was also kind of defensive about not wanting to look like a show-off or a pushover. Meanwhile, they thought I was being smug for even bringing it up. Nobody was really wrong. We were all just misreading each other. The best part is that we've actually started communicating better since then. Like, if someone's short on cash, they'll just say it. If I offer to cover something, they either accept or decline without the weird guilt. It's more open now, more honest, so yeah, I guess in the end, it all worked out. But it took a lot of awkward dinners, uncomfortable silences, and self-reflection to get here. Next time I get a free meal, I'll keep my mouth shut, enjoy the food, and make sure nobody walks away thinking I was keeping score. Final update. It's been almost a full year since that dinner fiasco, and I honestly can't believe how much a single night changed how I view friendship, money, and pride. At first, it felt like a silly misunderstanding blown way out of proportion. But over time, I realized it was more than that. It was about ego, communication, and the invisible expectations people carry into friendships. After the first update, things eventually went back to normal on the surface. But it wasn't quite the same underneath. We hung out, cracked jokes, and even took a weekend trip to Nashville together. But the easygoing vibe we used to have before that dinner was never fully the same. There was this unspoken sense that everyone was walking on eggshells about money. I noticed people were hyper-aware of who paid for what, who ordered more, who tipped less. It was subtle, but it was there. That tension hit a peak a few months later when Jake hosted a group dinner at his place. He grilled steaks, Rachel brought sides, and Tyler handled drinks. Everyone chipped in for groceries through Venmo, but not me. Jake texted me afterwards saying, "Hey, no rush, but your share was $30. Here's the thing. I had sent him $30, but somehow it didn't go through." I showed him the screenshot later, and it turned out it was just pending due to some app glitch. No big deal, right? But Rachel made a sarcastic joke about me dodging another bill, and everyone laughed except me. It was meant to be playful, but it hit a nerve. I just smiled and said nothing. But inside I was done letting that dinner night define how people saw me. That night, when I got home, I realized something. I'd spent months apologizing, over-explaining, and walking on eggshells for something I didn't even do wrong. I wasn't stingy, I didn't trick anyone. I just didn't want to use a favor for a group that didn't appreciate it. But somehow, that single decision stuck to me like a label. The guy who wouldn't pick up the tab. So, I made a quiet decision. I'd stop trying to prove anything. If people misunderstood me, so be it. The real turning point came a few weeks later when I went out for lunch with Tyler. Just the two of us. He brought it up out of nowhere. He said he'd been thinking about that night and realized it wasn't fair how everyone made me out to be the bad guy. He admitted that the free meal thing had rubbed him wrong at first, because he assumed I was trying to flex. But after seeing me handle things the way I did, never throwing it back at anyone, never making a scene, he realized it was just a misunderstanding. That conversation meant more than he probably realized. I told him I didn't hold a grudge, but yeah, it had changed how I approached things. We talked for hours about pride, friendship, and how weird money can get once people's incomes start to shift. Tyler had just gotten a big promotion, and he said even he noticed how weird some friends got when he offered to pay. It made me see the whole thing from a bigger perspective. How people's relationships with money can twist their perception of simple gestures. It's not really about the bill, it's about power, fairness, and what people think those things say about them. Fast forward to last month. We all finally went out together again. Same restaurant as before. I almost didn't want to go, but Jake convinced me. He even texted beforehand. No weird vibes this time, just dinner. And surprisingly, it was great. We laughed, reminisced, and for the first time since that incident, it actually felt like old times. When the bill came, Jake jokingly said, "Anyone got any hookups tonight?" And everyone cracked up. Even I laughed. Then, out of nowhere, Rachel said, "Actually, this one's on me." Everyone kind of froze. Rachel smiled and said, "I feel like we owe you one." It wasn't about the money. It was about acknowledgement, and I could tell it was her quiet way of apologizing for how things went down back then. I thanked her, but I also told her, "We're good." Really, that dinner felt like closing a chapter. After that, things just clicked back into place. We're older now, busier, and not as inseparable as we once were. But the friendship feels more grounded, more adult. We learned how to talk about awkward stuff without ego getting in the way. I also learned to stop explaining my choices to people who are determined to misunderstand them. Sometimes people need to project something onto you to deal with their own insecurities. And that's okay. You can't control it. What you can control is how you carry yourself through it. Looking back, I don't regret how I handled that night anymore. It taught me boundaries and self-respect in a way few things have. It also taught me that friendship isn't about who pays the bill. It's about who shows up when things get uncomfortable, who's willing to talk things through, and who's capable of admitting when they were wrong. Now, when we go out, I don't flinch when the check hits the table. Sometimes I pay, sometimes someone else does. Sometimes we split it evenly. No drama, no pride, no guilt, just friends sharing food and laughter again. And honestly, That feels like the most expensive lesson I've ever gotten from a simple dinner. Stories number 5. My younger cousin ruined our relationship over a borrowed designer dress. I never thought a single dress could cause this much chaos. But here we are. I, 30F, lent my younger cousin, Harper, 23F, a designer dress a few months ago. And now she's acting like I committed a crime for asking for it back. For some context, I work in fashion marketing, so I've collected a few nice pieces over the years. I'm not rich or anything, but I do splurge sometimes on high-end items I genuinely love and take care of. One of them is this gorgeous emerald green satin gown by Reformation that I wore to a gala last year. It's not red carpet couture, but it cost me nearly $600, which is not something I can just replace easily. Harper and I have always been close. She's my aunt's daughter, and we basically grew up together. She's 7 years younger and has always looked up to me. Her words, not mine. When she graduated from college this past spring, she asked if she could borrow something really special to wear to her friend's wedding. She said she wanted to feel confident and a little glamorous. At first, I hesitated. Harper can be careless. I've seen how she treats her stuff, but she promised to take good care of it. She even swore she'd get it professionally cleaned before returning it. She said she'd only wear it for one night. I thought, fine, it's family, I'll trust her, big mistake. The weekend of the wedding came and went, and I saw the photos on Instagram. Harper looked stunning. No lie, the dress fit her beautifully. I even commented, "You look amazing," thinking she'd drop it off soon after. But weeks passed, and no dress. I texted her casually, "Hey, when you get a chance, can I grab the green dress back?" She replied, "Oh yeah, totally, I still need to take it to the cleaners." A week later, nothing. Another week, still nothing. I texted again, and she said she'd been super busy with work. At this point, it had been over a month. Finally, my patience wore thin. I asked directly, "Harper, I really need the dress back this week. Can you please drop it off or mail it to me?" Her tone changed instantly. She sent this long message saying she didn't appreciate how I was pressuring her, and that I was making her feel bad when she'd done nothing wrong. I was floored. I reminded her that she borrowed it months ago, and it wasn't hers to keep. She didn't respond for 2 days. Then she finally texted, "I'll bring it to the family BBQ this weekend, okay? Can you please stop stressing me out about it?" Fine, whatever. At least I'd get the dress back. Except I didn't. At the BBQ, she showed up all smiles and handed me a dry cleaning bag that I assumed had the dress inside. When I got home and opened it, my stomach dropped. The dress was ruined. There was a huge wine stain on the side, some faint deodorant marks under the arms, and a small tear near the zipper. And the kicker? The tag from the cleaners was dated 3 weeks ago, meaning she'd known about the damage and hadn't said a word. I called her immediately. She didn't pick up, so I texted her photos and asked what happened. Her reply? "It wasn't that bad when I gave it to the cleaners. You're exaggerating." I was stunned. I told her it was completely unwearable, and that she should reimburse me for it since she'd ruined it. That's when she lost it. She accused me of humiliating her and treating her like a criminal. She said I embarrassed her in front of everyone because apparently, when I texted her at the BBQ to remind her about the dress, a couple of our cousins overheard her mention it and teased her for owing me. She said, "You made me look cheap. Like I can't afford my own clothes." I said, "Harper, I didn't embarrass you. You embarrassed yourself by not taking care of something that wasn't yours." That didn't go over well. She started crying, said I was materialistic, and that family shouldn't put money over relationships. She told my aunt, her mom, who then called me and said I was being harsh and should let it go because Harper is young. Young? She's 23, not 13. I tried explaining to my aunt that it's not about the money. It's about respect. You borrow something, you return it in the same condition. My aunt said, "You have plenty of nice things. It's just one dress, just one dress." That's what everyone keeps saying, but none of them paid for it. None of them worked extra hours to afford it. None of them had to watch it come back stained and ripped while being called shallow for caring. I told Harper if she wasn't going to take responsibility, then she wasn't borrowing anything from me ever again. She responded with, "Good, because I don't want your stuck-up clothes anyway." It's been a month since then, and we haven't spoken. She unfollowed me on Instagram, and apparently she's been telling people I blew up over a dress and tried to shame her publicly. My aunt texted me last week saying Harper still cries when my name comes up and that I should apologize for how I handled things. I laughed out loud when I read that. Apologize? For asking for my own dress back? The truth is, I'm hurt. Not just about the dress, but about how little accountability she took. I've always supported her. I helped her with her resume, got her an interview at a marketing firm, and even helped her move into her apartment last year. I was never the uptight older cousin. I just expected basic respect. The thing that really stung was when another cousin told me Harper said, I think she wanted an excuse to cut me off. She's always been jealous that I'm prettier. That one hit me like a slap. I didn't even know what to say. All I could think was, that's how little she understood me. I guess some people just show you who they really are when there's no benefit in pretending anymore. I've decided to let it go. Not because she deserves forgiveness, but because I don't want to carry this bitterness. I've stopped engaging with that side of the family for now. My peace means more than their guilt trips. And as for the dress, it's still hanging in my closet, damaged and useless. But I can't bring myself to throw it away. It's a reminder. Not of money lost, but of boundaries learned. Sometimes the price of peace isn't what you spend, it's what you stop tolerating. Update. My younger cousin ruined our relationship over a borrowed designer dress. It's been about 6 weeks since everything went down with Harper and the dress, and I honestly thought the drama would die off on its own. I figured time and distance would cool things down, turns out. I seriously underestimated how long grudges can simmer when family gossip gets involved. After my original post, I decided to keep my distance from that side of the family for a bit. I didn't block anyone, but I muted group chats, skipped a few Sunday dinners, and focused on my own life. Work was busy. I started seeing someone new, Evan, and I was finally starting to feel like I'd moved on from the whole mess. Then came my aunt's birthday dinner. My mom convinced me to go, saying, "It's been long enough. Maybe this is a good time to patch things up." I wasn't sure, but I didn't want to cause more tension. So I went. The dinner was at a restaurant downtown, kind of upscale but cozy. I dressed casually and brought a nice bottle of wine as a gift. Everything felt normal at first. Everyone was chatting, laughing, catching up. Harper was there, sitting 2 seats away from me, and she didn't even look in my direction. I didn't either. I figured, fine. Civil silence is better than fake friendliness. But about halfway through dinner, my aunt, Harper's mom, decided to make a toast, and it was one of those thinly veiled, passive-aggressive family speeches that you just know is going to turn awkward. She raised her glass and said, "I just want to thank everyone for being here, even those who've been distant lately. Family means forgiveness, not material things." You could practically hear a pin drop. I froze. I didn't make eye contact with anyone, but I could feel people glancing between us. Harper looked down at her plate, smirking. My mom shot me a warning look, silently begging me not to say anything. I didn't. I just took a sip of my drink and let it roll off, or at least I tried to after dinner. While people were chatting by the exit, Harper cornered me near the coat rack. She had that tone, fake sweet but sharp underneath. She said, "You could have said something nice. You know, Mom's been really hurt by how cold you've been." I blinked at her. I didn't think a family dinner was the right place to talk about this. She shrugged. "You embarrassed me enough already. Maybe it would have been good for everyone to hear your side." That line set something off in me. For months, I'd bitten my tongue, let her paint me as the villain, and let everyone believe I was some shallow diva who cared more about clothes than family. I was done with that, so I told her calmly but clearly, "You borrowed something expensive, damaged it, lied about it, and never apologized. I didn't embarrass you, Harper. You did that yourself. I just asked for honesty." Her face went red immediately. She looked around to see if anyone was watching. Then she hissed, "You're obsessed with that stupid dress." "It's pathetic," I said. "No. What's pathetic is acting like I owe you forgiveness when you've never even taken responsibility." That was it. She stormed off, muttering something under her breath. I grabbed my coat and said a polite goodbye to my mom and aunt, then left. My phone buzzed before I even got home. 3 texts in a row from my aunt. "I can't believe you confronted Harper like that." She came home crying. "You really need to grow up and move on." I didn't respond. The next morning my mom called. She wasn't angry, just tired. She said she understood why I was upset, but that keeping this going was tearing the family apart. I told her I wasn't keeping anything going. I was just not letting people rewrite what happened. Then a few days later, something unexpected happened. I got a text from an unknown number. It was Harper. "Hey, I shouldn't have yelled at you. I'm sorry for ruining the dress. I didn't know how to fix it and felt stupid. So I avoided it." I didn't respond right away. I just stared at it. It wasn't a full apology, but it was the first crack in the wall she'd built. Later that night I replied, "Thank you for saying that. I wish you'd told me sooner. I don't care about the dress anymore, I just wanted honesty." She didn't reply for 2 days. Then she sent one more message. "I get that now. I'll Venmo you for part of the cost. I can't afford the whole thing, but I want to do something." It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the acknowledgement. I told her that was kind, but not necessary. I said I'd rather we just move on and treat each other with respect. She heart-reacted the message, and that was it. Since then, we haven't had any deep conversations. But things are calmer. She liked one of my Instagram posts last week, and my aunt even texted me a "hope you're doing well" message. I'm not rushing back into family gatherings, but at least the air feels lighter. I've realized that not every relationship deserves full reconciliation. Sometimes you just settle for peace, even if it's quiet and a little awkward. I'm okay with that. The dress still hangs in my closet. I haven't fixed it, but I don't think I will. Every time I look at it, it reminds me how boundaries don't make you selfish. They protect your sanity. I used to think being the bigger person meant forgiving and forgetting no matter what. Now I think it means knowing when to stop trying to be the hero in someone else's story. And honestly, that feels better than any apology ever could. Final update. My younger cousin ruined our relationship over a borrowed designer dress. It's been nearly 6 months since my last update, and I can finally say this whole situation has settled in a way I never expected. Not perfect, but peaceful. If you've ever dealt with family drama that spiraled way past what it should have, you'll understand when I say, sometimes closure doesn't come all at once. It trickles in through small, quiet moments when you finally stop waiting for someone else to change. A few weeks after Harper's last text, we went back to polite, distant civility. No hostility, no warmth, just quiet acknowledgement. We were both invited to my cousin Lily's engagement party in August, and I'll admit I was nervous. I hadn't seen Harper or my aunt in person since the restaurant blow-up months earlier. I considered skipping it, but Lily's always been like a sister to me, and I didn't want Harper's immaturity to make me miss something important. So I went. When I arrived, the backyard was decked out with fairy lights and candles. Everyone looked happy, relaxed. Harper was standing near the drinks table, laughing with a few friends. When she saw me, she froze. Not in an angry way, just surprised. I gave her a polite nod, and to my surprise, she smiled back. It wasn't a fake, forced smile either, just a small, genuine one. Later in the evening, she came up to me. I braced for something awkward, but instead she said quietly, "Hey, you look really good," I thanked her, and after a pause she added, "I've been meaning to tell you again that I'm sorry about everything. Not just the dress, but how I acted. I was embarrassed and defensive, and I made it worse." That caught me off guard. Her tone wasn't snarky or dramatic, just honest. For the first time, it felt like she wasn't trying to justify herself. I told her, "It hurt, Harper, not because of the dress itself, but because you made me feel like I was crazy for expecting respect." She nodded, eyes glassy. I think I was projecting. My job was going bad at the time. My ex had just dumped me, and I felt like such a screw-up. When you asked for the dress back, I took it as you judging me, even though you weren't. It's strange how someone's honesty can hit harder than anger ever could. I realized in that moment that Harper wasn't a villain. She was a young woman who made a mistake and handled it badly. And while that didn't excuse her behavior, it did help me understand it. We talked for nearly half an hour. She told me she'd saved up and was starting a side hustle reselling vintage clothes online. "Ironic," she said with a laugh. "Considering how I ruined yours." That made both of us laugh, and it broke the last bit of tension between us. We ended the conversation with a hug. It wasn't one of those dramatic movie reconciliations, just a quiet, mutual understanding that we could start fresh, with new boundaries and fewer assumptions. Later, my aunt approached me. I expected another lecture, but instead, she sighed and said, "I didn't realize how much this affected you. I just wanted everyone to get along, but I pushed the wrong way." She apologized too, which, honestly, shocked me more than Harper's apology. I guess she saw how much Harper had matured and realized her own role in enabling her behavior. Since then, things have slowly improved. We're not best friends, but Harper and I talk occasionally. Little things, like sending memes or complimenting each other's outfits on Instagram. A few weeks ago, she even texted me asking for fashion advice for a work event and joked, "Don't worry, I'm not borrowing anything this time." I told her she'd better not, and we both laughed. It's funny, that ruined dress, which I once saw as a symbol of betrayal, now feels like a weird kind of turning point. I've left it hanging in my closet, wine stain and all, a small reminder that boundaries are necessary, even and especially with people you love. I've also changed how I handle my relationships in general. I'm still close with my family, but I've learned not to be the fixer anymore. I used to be the one everyone leaned on, the reliable cousin, the problem solver, the one who lent, gave, and forgave endlessly. But now I know that protecting my peace doesn't make me selfish. It makes me healthy. Evan, my boyfriend, even said the other night, "You seem lighter these days." And he's right. I used to carry everyone else's guilt like it was my responsibility to heal it. Now, I only carry what's mine. Harper and I will probably never be as close as we were when she was younger. But that's okay. Relationships change. Sometimes they break, and sometimes they bend and reshape into something new. What matters is that this time, the effort feels mutual. The last time I saw her, at my aunt's house for Sunday brunch, she showed up wearing this cute thrifted sundress and said, "I've been hunting for one like your green dress, but I still can't find it." I smiled and said, "Good, that one's one of a kind." She laughed, and for the first time in a long time it didn't feel tense or awkward. Just normal. Maybe that's what forgiveness really is. Not pretending nothing happened, but being able to look back without feeling angry anymore. And the dress? It's still there, quietly hanging in my closet. It doesn't make me sad now. It makes me grateful for what it taught me about trust, boundaries, and letting go, because sometimes peace doesn't come when everything's fixed. It comes when you finally stop needing it to be. Stories number 6, my sister-in-law went too far. I didn't expect to be living with my sister-in-law at 31, but life has a weird sense of humor. My husband, Chris, and I bought our house 2 years ago. Small, 3-bedroom, quiet neighborhood, close to his family. When his younger sister, Amber, got divorced last year, things fell apart for her fast. She had nowhere to go, no savings, and a 6-year-old son, Dylan. Chris immediately said, "She can stay with us until she gets back on her feet." I didn't fight it. I actually felt bad for her. Amber had always been emotional but decent enough to me. I figured a few months of support wouldn't kill us. We moved Dylan into the guest room, set up an air mattress in the office for her, and tried to make her feel at home. The problem was, she really made herself at home. It started small. She'd leave her stuff everywhere. Makeup on the bathroom counter, piles of laundry in the living room, shoes by the door. I'd clean up quietly, hoping she'd notice, but she never did. Then came the little digs. "Wow, you're so strict about cleaning." Or, "You must love bossing people around." At first, I brushed it off, assuming she was just stressed. Then she started commenting on how Chris and I ran our marriage. If we disagreed about something, she'd insert herself. "I don't know why you get mad about that. He's just trying to help." Once, I told Chris I wished he'd help more around the house, and Amber literally said, "You sound like my ex. Always nagging." I remember standing there, holding a dish towel, thinking, "You're living in my house for free and you're calling me a nag?" Chris didn't say much. He'd just sigh and say, "She's going through a hard time. Let it go." I tried, I really did. By month 4, she still hadn't made any progress on finding a place. She wasn't working full-time, just doing odd jobs and blaming the job market. Meanwhile, she'd order food delivery, leave her car parked halfway into our grass, and treat me like some roommate she could talk down to. The breaking point came during a birthday dinner for Chris's mom. We all went to a restaurant. His parents, his brother, and us. Amber came too, of course, dressed like she was going clubbing. Things were fine at first, but once the drinks started flowing, she decided to make me her entertainment. It started when my mother-in-law complimented my outfit. Amber laughed and said, "Yeah, she tries to dress nice for once. Usually she's in sweats yelling about the house." Everyone laughed awkwardly. I forced a smile, but my face was burning. Then she added, "You should see her at home. She's like a drill sergeant. Poor Chris can't even breathe without permission." That time, the table actually went quiet. Chris looked at her and said, "Amber, knock it off." But she just waved her hand and said, "I'm joking." Relax. I didn't say another word for the rest of the dinner. I felt humiliated, like I was being mocked in front of my in-laws, treated like some uptight, nagging wife stereotype. When we got home, I told Chris I was done. He tried to calm me down, saying Amber was drunk and didn't mean it, but I was past the point of excuses. I told him she needed to start making plans to move out. I even gave a timeline. 2 months. Chris looked torn, but I reminded him this was supposed to be temporary. She's not even trying anymore, I said. She's comfortable because we let her be. He said he'd talk to her. The next morning, Amber came storming into the kitchen. So now you're kicking me out? She snapped. I said, you're not being kicked out. I'm asking you to make a plan. There's a difference. She laughed. Loud, bitter. Wow, you're unbelievable. You just can't handle another woman in your house, huh? Afraid of a little competition? That floored me. Competition? You're my husband's sister. She rolled her eyes. You know what I mean. You act like you're queen of the house. Maybe if you weren't so controlling, people would actually like being around you. I didn't yell. I just looked at her and said, you're free to go live anywhere else if you don't like it here. She left the room muttering something about me being insecure and jealous. Chris tried to smooth things over again, saying Amber didn't mean it, that she's under pressure. I told him flat out, you can either help me enforce this or she can take you with her. That got his attention. For the next few weeks, things were painfully tense. Amber avoided me, which honestly made the house feel peaceful for once. She started spending nights at friends' places. Then one day, she told Chris she found an apartment with a coworker. The day she moved out, she didn't say goodbye to me, just packed her things and left. Dylan gave me a quick hug and that was it. I thought I'd feel guilty, but I mostly felt relieved. That night, Chris came home quiet. He admitted he felt bad but also said he knew it was the right thing. I didn't realize how much she was taking over, he said. The house feels different already. A few days later, Amber sent me a text. Hope you're happy. You got your perfect little life back? I didn't reply because, yeah, I am happy. Not because she's gone, but because I finally stood up for myself in my own home. Now, months later, our house actually feels like ours again. Chris and I are doing better. We argue less, we laugh more. I even turned the old office, her temporary room, into a small reading space. Sometimes I think about how much I let her get away with because I didn't want to cause family drama. But keeping the peace at my own expense wasn't peace at all. It was silence, and honestly, I've had enough silence for a lifetime. Update. It's been about 6 months since Amber moved out, and I thought everything would calm down once she was gone. For the most part, it did. But apparently peace doesn't last long when family's involved. At first, things were great. Chris and I were actually happy again. We cooked dinner together, watched shows without tension hanging over us, and didn't feel like we were walking on eggshells in our own house. I'd wake up and not see piles of laundry that weren't mine or hear her blasting music at midnight. It felt like we could finally breathe. Then came the guilt trips. It started with small comments from Chris's mom. She'd call to check in and drop little lines like, Amber says she's struggling to afford daycare, or she's really having a hard time adjusting. The first few times, I said, that's unfortunate, but I hope she figures it out. I wasn't being sarcastic. I genuinely hoped she would. But it was obvious Amber had been venting to the family about how heartless I was for making her leave. Chris's brother, Jake, even texted him saying, man, I get it's your wife's house, but that's your sister. That phrase, your wife's house, made my blood boil. Chris and I bought this place together. Both our names are on the mortgage, but somehow, in his family's eyes, it's my fault because I didn't keep the door open indefinitely. Chris stood up for me, though. He told them she was supposed to stay short-term, and that she crossed the line with the public humiliation thing. But I could tell it was wearing on him. Every time his mom brought up Amber, he'd tense up a few weeks later. We went to a family barbecue at his parents' place. I debated skipping it, but Chris asked me to go, said it would show everyone we were fine and end the awkwardness. I agreed, but I regretted it within the first 15 minutes. Amber was there. I hadn't seen her since she moved out. She looked different, more put together. She'd gotten a new haircut and was wearing a bright floral dress. When I walked in, she gave me a fake smile and said, wow, you actually came? Yeah, I said. Nice to see you too. For the first hour, she acted like everything was fine. Small talk, smiles, playing with Dylan. I thought maybe we'd actually moved past it. But during dinner, things took a turn. Someone made a joke about how hard it is to find affordable rent. And Amber chimed in loudly, tell me about it. I used to live somewhere rent-free until I got kicked out for being too honest. Everyone went silent. I put my fork down. You mean after you humiliated me in front of your entire family? Amber laughed. You really can't take a joke, can you? I looked right at her and said, it stopped being a joke the minute you made it about my marriage. Chris's mom jumped in, saying, girls, please, not at the table. I didn't say another word. I stood up, told Chris I was leaving, and walked to the car. He followed me a minute later, looking embarrassed and angry, not at me, but at his sister. He told me later that he stayed behind just long enough to tell Amber that was her last chance. He told her she'd burned every bridge she had with us. Apparently, she cried, claiming I've turned him against her. For the next few weeks, the family group chat blew up with messages. His mom said we were being too harsh, his dad stayed neutral, and Jake told Chris he should remember blood is thicker than water. Chris left the chat completely. That moment, that small act meant everything to me. He said, "I'm done defending people who don't respect my wife." It's been months since then, and we've barely heard from Amber. I know through mutual friends that she's working at a daycare now, sharing a place with a friend. I honestly hope she's doing okay. But I've learned that hoping someone is okay doesn't mean I have to invite chaos back into my life. The weird thing is, even though her absence made everything calmer, it also made me realize how much I let myself shrink to avoid being the problem. I spent so long trying to keep everyone comfortable that I forgot that I live here too. Now, I set boundaries without guilt. If someone makes a rude comment, I don't bite my tongue. I've stopped caring if the in-laws think I'm too direct. Respecting myself has become more important than being liked by people who never really tried to understand me. Chris told me the other night that he wishes he'd stood up for me sooner. I told him it's not about who's right anymore. It's about not repeating the same mistake. We both learned that temporary needs a deadline, and family doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. Funny thing is, Dylan still calls sometimes. He'll FaceTime Chris and ask if he can say hi to Aunt Lissa. I always talk to him. He's a good kid. None of this was his fault. I make sure he knows that, so that's where things are now. I have my peace back. My home feels like mine again. And if that makes me the bad guy in Amber's version of the story, I'm fine with that because in my version, I finally stopped letting people walk all over me. And that's a story I can live with. Final update. It's been almost 2 years since Amber moved out. And looking back, I can finally say things are calm. Not fake calm, but real, steady, peaceful calm. The kind where you can breathe without waiting for the next argument or awkward phone call. I didn't think it would ever feel this normal again. Chris and I have grown a lot from all of it. For a while after the last family barbecue, we went mostly no contact with his family. Not out of anger, but because every conversation eventually circled back to Amber. His mom would guilt trip him, his brother would throw in little comments, and it always left us both feeling exhausted. So we stepped away. We told them we needed space. It was weird at first. Holidays were quiet. No big family dinners, no loud laughter from the in-laws' house, no Dylan running around chasing their dog. But honestly, the quiet was good for us. We learned how to just be together without family politics constantly simmering in the background. Then earlier this year, Chris's mom reached out. She said Amber had started therapy and wanted to apologize. I didn't respond right away. I had already closed that chapter in my mind. I wasn't angry anymore. But I also didn't feel the need to reopen something I'd already made peace with. Chris wanted to hear her out, though. So we agreed to meet at a coffee shop. Neutral ground, no family around, no drama. When I saw her walk in, I barely recognized her. She looked calm, quieter, different in a way I couldn't quite explain. She ordered her coffee, sat down, and for the first time in years, she didn't start with excuses or sarcasm. She just said, "I was awful to you, and I'm sorry." No tears, no defensive tone, just honesty. I didn't respond right away. She kept talking. She said therapy helped her realize how jealous she'd been, not of me personally, but of the stability Chris and I had. When her marriage fell apart, she said she felt like she failed at everything. Watching us have what she'd lost made her bitter. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said. "I was angry that you had what I wanted back." It was one of those rare moments where someone actually owns their behavior without trying to water it down. I told her I appreciated the apology. I didn't tell her I forgave her right then because forgiveness doesn't work like a switch, but I did say I hoped she kept working on herself. After that meeting, something in me relaxed. It felt like I'd been holding my breath for years without realizing it. A few weeks later, Amber texted me to say she was moving out of state for a new job. A preschool offered her a full-time teaching position with benefits, and she and Dylan were moving in with one of her college friends. Her message ended with, "Thank you for not giving up on my brother. I didn't deserve the grace you gave me, but I'm grateful for it." I didn't expect to cry when I read it, but I did. Chris was emotional too. He said, "Maybe now everyone gets to start fresh," and he was right. Since then, things have genuinely gotten better with his family. His mom still walks on eggshells a bit around me, but she stopped bringing up the past. She even invited us to Thanksgiving this year. And we said yes. We went, and it was normal. Amber called into FaceTime, and she looked happy. Really happy. Dylan showed off a drawing he made at his new school, and she looked proud. There were no jabs, no tension, no weird silence, just laughter and food and family. I didn't realize how much I missed that until it came back in a healthy way. At home, things are steady. Chris and I are thinking about starting a family next year. The reading room I made after Amber moved out is now half nursery planning zone, half cozy escape. Every once in a while, I find something that reminds me of those months she lived here. A coffee mug she left behind, a box of crayons from Dylan. But instead of feeling angry, I just smile because those things don't carry bitterness anymore. They just remind me of how much we all changed. The biggest thing I've learned is that setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's necessary. And sometimes the people who hate your boundaries the most are the ones who need them to grow. Amber told me in that coffee shop that being forced to leave was the wake-up call she needed. If you hadn't made me go, she said, I'd probably still be sitting on your couch complaining about how unfair my life was. I think about that a lot, about how protecting my peace didn't just help me. It pushed her to find her own footing. We still text sometimes, nothing deep, mostly updates about Dylan or random pictures. It's friendly, respectful. I don't expect us to ever be super close, but I'm okay with what it is now. Sometimes life doesn't give you clean endings. It gives you peace in pieces. And if you're patient enough, those pieces eventually fit together. So that's where I am, peaceful, grounded. A little older, a lot wiser, and finally free from all the guilt I used to carry. And if I could go back, I wouldn't change how I handled it, not one bit. Because that hard line I drew wasn't the end of something. It was the start of a better life for all of us. Stories number 7, The Package Thief Next Door. I've lived in this neighborhood for about 3 years now, and up until recently, I'd say it's been a pretty peaceful place. Quiet, friendly. Everyone kind of minds their own business, but still waves when you pass by. The kind of suburb where people mow their lawns on Saturdays and kids ride bikes until dinner. But everything changed a few months ago when I started noticing my packages going missing. At first I thought it was a fluke. Maybe a delivery mix-up, or porch pirates passing through. Stuff like that happens sometimes, but as it kept happening, I started realizing it wasn't random at all. Someone was stealing from me, and worse. I had a pretty good idea who it was. It started with something small. I'd ordered a pack of coffee beans I like. Expensive stuff. Roasted from a small place in Seattle. The tracking said delivered, but there was nothing on my porch. I double-checked with the delivery company, and they confirmed the driver had dropped it off right at my doorstep at 2:47 p.m. With a photo, sure enough, there it was in the photo. My porch. My doormat, my house number clearly visible. So where was it? I knocked on a few doors just to see if maybe a neighbor had picked it up by mistake. Most of them were polite and said they hadn't seen anything. But when I got to the house next door, belonging to a woman named Donna, something felt off. Donna's lived there a little longer than me. Maybe 5 years, she's mid-40s, single, always has her nose in everyone's business, but tries to act sweet about it. The kind of neighbor who waves while she's secretly watching you through her blinds. When I asked her if she'd seen my package, she immediately launched into this dramatic story about how her packages had also been stolen recently. She said, "Oh my gosh, you too? These delivery drivers are getting worse every day, I swear. Half the time they don't even deliver stuff and just mark it as done." I thanked her and left. But something about her tone didn't sit right with me. The thing is, I knew she got packages constantly. Amazon boxes piled up on her porch all the time, and I'd never once seen a package missing from hers. The next week, it happened again. This time it was a book I'd ordered for work. Same story. Tracking photo. Confirmed delivery but no box on my porch. I started to get suspicious, so I bought a cheap security camera and mounted it discreetly near my door. A few days later, I ordered something else. A new set of headphones. The package was supposed to arrive while I was at work, so I made sure my camera was on and recording. That evening, I got home and, surprise, no package, but when I checked the footage, my jaw dropped. At 3:02 p.m. the delivery driver shows up, drops off the box and leaves, then, at 3:16 p.m. I see Donna. She walks right up to my porch, looks around and picks up the box. She doesn't even hesitate, just grabs it like it's hers and walks back to her house. I couldn't believe it. She had the nerve to steal from me in broad daylight. Knowing there are cameras everywhere these days, I decided to handle it calmly at first. I walked over that evening, knocked on her door, and said, "Hey Donna, I think one of my packages might have been accidentally delivered to you today." She gave me this fake concerned look and said, "Oh no, sweetie, I didn't see anything. You know these delivery drivers have been all over the place lately. I wanted to call her out right there, but I bit my tongue. I figured it'd be better to get all my evidence in line first. So I waited. The next time I ordered something, I had the camera running again. Sure enough, the same thing happened. But this time, she was a little sneakier. She waited longer, looked around even more carefully, and tucked the box under her sweater as she walked off. I called the police that night. I showed them the footage, gave them timestamps, and even printed the delivery confirmations. They took it seriously, thankfully. The officer said porch theft is technically a misdemeanor in our area, but with repeated offenses and video proof, they could push for something bigger. The next day, they paid Donna a visit. I didn't see everything, but I watched from my window as 2 officers stood on her porch for a good 20 minutes. She looked panicked, gesturing wildly, and at one point, she even looked directly toward my house. When they left, she slammed her door so hard it rattled my windows. A few hours later, I heard another knock, this time on my door. I opened it to find Donna standing there with a forced smile and a cardboard box in her hands. "Oh my gosh," she said. "You're not going to believe this. I just found this behind my porch furniture. I guess the wind must have blown it over from your house or something." I just stared at her. "Behind your furniture?" I asked. She nodded enthusiastically. "Crazy, right? I didn't even see it before." I took the box and said, "Donna, I have you on video taking my packages. The police saw it too." Her smile froze. "What? I've got you on camera twice? Stop stealing from me." For a moment she just stood there, her face cycling through about 5 different emotions. Shock, anger, embarrassment, then back to denial. Finally she said, "You're overreacting. Those packages look just like mine. It was an honest mistake." I shut the door on her mid-sentence. After that, she stopped speaking to me altogether. She'd still be out in her yard sometimes, but if I came out, she'd scurry inside like a guilty kid. A few weeks later, I got a note from the local post office saying they'd been contacted by law enforcement regarding delivery disputes on my street. Apparently, Donna tried to report that her packages were being stolen now. The irony was wild. Since then, I've kept the camera up, and no more packages have gone missing. But Donna still gives me the dirtiest looks when I walk by. Sometimes I'll catch her muttering to herself when she's out front. But honestly, I don't care anymore. I even went a step further and shared my footage and story on the neighborhood's Facebook group, not naming names, but saying, "If your packages have been going missing, check your security footage. It might not be a random thief." Within an hour, 3 people messaged me saying they'd had similar issues and suspected the same person. Donna's been awfully quiet online since. I never wanted to start drama, but I'm glad I stood my ground. People like that count on others being too polite or embarrassed to call them out. But the moment I decided I wasn't going to play nice anymore, it all stopped. I've got my piece back, my packages back, and a new porch light camera that sends footage straight to my phone. So if Donna, or anyone else, tries to pull something again, I'll be ready. And honestly, knowing she probably flinches every time a delivery truck drives by, feels like justice enough. Update. It's been about 5 months since the whole package theft incident with Donna, and honestly, I didn't think there'd be anything else to say about it. I thought she'd be too embarrassed to ever try anything again. I was wrong. Apparently, embarrassment has an expiration date. Things calmed down for a while after I confronted her. She didn't apologize, of course, but she stayed out of my way. I figured that was the best I was going to get, every now and then. I'd catch her staring at me from behind her blinds. But whatever. If she wanted to live like some suburban villain in a low-budget mystery, that was her problem. Then around late February, weird stuff started happening again. Not full-blown theft, but just little things. One day, my mail was crumpled and shoved halfway into my box instead of neatly delivered like usual. Another day, I found a torn Amazon envelope on my porch that wasn't mine, and it had my address scratched out with a marker. At first, I brushed it off. But the real kicker came when I ordered a package containing a small Bluetooth speaker. It was supposed to be delivered on a Friday afternoon. I got the notification it had arrived while I was still at work. So I checked the live feed from my porch cam, and I saw Donna again. Not taking it this time, sniffing the package, like some sort of package sommelier. She literally leaned over my porch, picked up the box, looked at the shipping label, and then put it down after about 10 seconds. I could tell she saw the camera too because she gave this fake, awkward wave before walking away. I honestly laughed out loud at that. It was like she was testing the boundaries, seeing what she could get away with without crossing the legal line again. I sent the clip to my buddy Mark, who's a local cop, and he just said, "She's probably salty we talked to her last time. Keep your cameras running." So that's what I did. A few weeks later, it escalated again. I came home one night to find my trash bin tipped over and my recycling scattered across my driveway. At first I thought it was raccoons, then I noticed something weird. Only my shipping boxes were torn up, like someone had deliberately opened them and looked inside before tossing them. That's when I decided enough was enough. I bought another camera, one facing my driveway this time, and a small motion-activated light that triggered whenever someone got close. Within 3 nights I caught her again, around 11:30 p.m. She walked up to my trash cans wearing a hoodie, which, by the way, was hilarious because she's terrible at being sneaky. She peeked into the bin, pulled out a couple of empty boxes, and walked off with them. I saved the footage and called the non-emergency police line again. Same officer from before came by, and when I showed him the video, he sighed and said, "Well, she's definitely trying to mess with you, but technically she didn't steal anything this time." He said they'd logged the complaint but couldn't press charges unless it escalated. I was fine with that. Honestly, I didn't need her arrested. I just wanted her to stop being weird. So I decided to take a more creative approach. I started labeling my boxes with ridiculous fake items before throwing them out. Things like adult diapers, used cat litter, and toenail fungus cream. I even printed fake return labels just to make it more believable. And sure enough, she took the bait one night. I saw her on camera picking through my bin again, and when she read one of the labels, she made this disgusted face and dropped it immediately. I think that was the moment she realized I knew exactly what she was doing, and that I was trolling her back. Since then, she hasn't touched my trash again. But oh, it didn't stop there. A few weeks later, I was walking my dog past her house, and she suddenly burst out her front door holding a clipboard. She accused me of harassing her by filming her property. I calmly told her, "Donna, my camera faces my porch and my driveway. If you keep showing up in that frame, that's on you." She yelled something about calling the homeowners association. I told her, "Go ahead," and walked away. Sure enough, a few days later, I got a very polite email from the HOA president, Jim. He said Donna had expressed concern about my security cameras. I replied with the footage showing her taking packages, going through my trash, and prowling around at night. Jim's response: one line, "Thank you for providing evidence. We'll handle this." And apparently they did, because about a week later, Donna's house got a bright orange notice posted on the front door about violations of community conduct and harassment. She took it down within the hour, but everyone saw it, and the gossip spread fast. I didn't post anything publicly, but the next time I was at the local coffee shop, my neighbor Linda leaned over and said, "So, Donna's not doing well, huh?" I just shrugged. The funny part? Ever since that HOA warning, she's been on her best behavior. Packages have been arriving on time, trash untouched, no drama. She even started waving again, though it's the most passive-aggressive wave I've ever seen. I'd like to say I feel bad for her, but I don't. She had multiple chances to stop before it got to this point. She could have just apologized, explained herself, moved on, but instead, she doubled down on being petty and creepy. Now I've got 3 cameras, motion lights, and a smile. "You're on camera" sticker on my mailbox. My friends joke that my house looks like Fort Knox, but hey, it works. Sometimes, I see delivery drivers chuckle when they drop stuff off because they know the story. I told one of them about it once, and he said, "Oh yeah, we've had reports about her before." Guess I wasn't the only one. At this point, I think Donna's finally realized she's out of moves. She's been quiet for 2 months now. No weird behavior, no trash tampering, no stolen packages. Maybe she learned her lesson, or maybe she just found someone else to bother. Either way, my porch is finally safe again. And honestly, every time a package shows up exactly where it's supposed to be, I feel a tiny spark of victory. Sometimes justice isn't dramatic. It's just the simple peace of knowing the neighborhood thief has finally been outsmarted. Final update. It's been over a year since I first caught Donna stealing my packages, and I didn't think this saga could get any more ridiculous. But it somehow managed to wrap up in the most unexpected, poetic way possible. For months, everything had been quiet. No missing packages, no late-night garbage snooping, no petty confrontations. Donna was still living next door, but we coexisted in complete silence. I honestly thought we'd finally move past it, each of us minding our own business. Then one evening last spring, I came home from work and saw a moving truck parked in front of Donna's house. I won't lie, I smiled. I figured she was finally moving out. Maybe she got tired of everyone side-eyeing her at the neighborhood block parties. Or maybe she wanted a fresh start somewhere where she wasn't known as the package thief. I was so curious that I walked outside to grab my mail, just to sneak a peek. Sure enough, 2 movers were carrying out her furniture. And there she was, Donna herself, standing by the driveway, clipboard in hand, barking orders. She spotted me, froze for half a second, then forced one of those tight smiles that doesn't reach your eyes. "Hey there," she said in this brittle, fake cheerful voice. "Looks like you'll have new neighbors soon." I just nodded and said, "Guess so, hope the next one's like cameras." She didn't respond, just pursed her lips and turned back to the movers. That should have been the end of it. But in true Donna fashion, she couldn't resist one last act of petty chaos before leaving. The next morning, I found an Amazon box sitting on my porch. I hadn't ordered anything, but it had my name and address printed clearly on the label. I thought it might be a gift or maybe a mix-up. I brought it inside, opened it, and immediately burst out laughing. Inside was a single roll of duct tape, a half-used candle, and a handwritten note that said, "Maybe now you can mind your own business." It was so absurd I actually admired it for a second, like, who goes through the trouble of printing a fake shipping label and packing up random junk just to deliver a parting shot? I guess Donna, the neighborhood's self-proclaimed victim of porch piracy, wanted to end things on her terms. I didn't even bother calling the cops. I snapped a picture of the box and the note and sent it to our HOA president, Jim, with the message, "Looks like Donna's farewell gift." His reply, "Unbelievable, enjoy the peace." Finally, and peace is exactly what I got. A few weeks later, the new neighbors moved in, a couple in their early 30s named Eric and Madison. They were friendly right off the bat, the kind of people who bring over baked goods and ask if you need help shoveling snow. Madison works from home, and one day she casually mentioned that the previous owner had warned her about some neighbor with cameras who spies on everyone. I almost spit out my coffee. I told her the whole story, how Donna had been the one caught stealing, how she twisted the narrative to make herself the victim. Madison's jaw dropped. Then she laughed and said, "Figures." She gave off weird energy when we met, apparently. Donna had told them she was moving because of neighborhood hostility, which is ironic, considering she created all of it anyway. I didn't think about her much after that. Life went back to normal. I ordered things freely again, relaxed on my porch, waved to neighbors without worrying someone was plotting revenge from behind their curtains. It was calm. But about 2 months ago, I ran into a delivery driver I recognized. The same guy who used to deliver during the height of the Donna era. We started chatting, and he laughed when I asked if he still delivered to her new address. "Oh, that lady?" he said. "Yeah, she moved over to the west side of town. Same complaints, though. I've heard she's been calling about packages going missing again." I couldn't believe it. She was still doing the same thing, probably still blaming drivers or neighbors for her own behavior. Some people just can't help themselves. It's weird, though. I didn't feel angry when he told me, just relieved. Relieved that she wasn't my problem anymore. That I didn't have to waste another ounce of energy thinking about her. Sometimes I catch myself glancing at her old house and remembering the ridiculousness of it all. The sneaky package thefts, the fake concern, the audacity to play the victim even when caught red-handed. It feels like another lifetime now. The funny thing is, her moving away actually made the whole neighborhood tighter. Everyone talks more now. We watch out for each other's deliveries. There's even a group chat where we post when a big box gets left out too long, just to make sure someone picks it up. It turned a bad situation into something good. The last bit of irony came a few weeks ago. I got a random letter in the mail addressed to current resident. It was an ad for a home security company, offering a discount on porch cameras. The flyer had a picture of a smiling woman receiving a package safely on her doorstep, with the tagline, "Protect what's yours." I laughed so hard I taped it to my fridge. Because if this whole experience taught me anything, it's that you can't control the Donnas of the world. You can only protect your space, your peace, and your stuff, and let karma handle the rest. Now every time a delivery truck pulls up, I get a little notification on my phone. Watch the driver place the box down, and smile. Not because I'm paranoid anymore, but because I appreciate the calm that comes from not living next to chaos. And if Donna's out there somewhere, still playing the same games, Well, maybe one day she'll get caught by someone with better cameras than mine. Until then, I'll just keep enjoying the silence. And every safely delivered package that lands exactly where it's supposed to. Stories number 8. My boyfriend can't stop waking me up. And I finally lost it. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to yell over something as simple as being woken up. But after last night, I don't know if I'm losing my patience or my mind. I, 28F, live with my boyfriend Chase, 31M. We've been together for about 2 years, living together for 1. I love him. I really do. He's kind, funny, great with my dog, and we've always had a solid relationship. But over the past few months, something as small as his sleep habits has started driving a wedge between us. To put it simply, Chase cannot seem to let me sleep. It started back in the spring, when he began having trouble sleeping through the night. He'd toss and turn, check his phone, get up to grab water, all that. I didn't mind at first. Everyone has restless nights. But then it became constant every night around 2 or 3 a.m. He'd either wake me up accidentally, or sometimes deliberately because he couldn't sleep alone in the silence. At first, I thought it was kind of sweet. In a weird way, like, he just wants company. But it got old fast. He'd shake my shoulder softly and whisper, "Babe, you awake?" I'd groan and say, "I am now." Then he'd start talking, sometimes about random stuff like work stress or a show he watched earlier. I tried to be supportive, thinking maybe he was just anxious or going through something. But after weeks of broken sleep, I started feeling like a zombie. I was snapping at coworkers, chugging coffee all day, and falling asleep on the couch the moment I got home. Meanwhile, he'd sleep in late, take naps, and then wonder why I was cranky. The first time I brought it up seriously, I tried to be calm. I told him I loved him, but I needed uninterrupted sleep. He promised he'd stop waking me. That lasted exactly 3 nights. Then came the night that broke me. It was a Wednesday. I had a big presentation at work the next morning, something I'd been preparing for weeks. I went to bed early, told him clearly, "Please don't wake me tonight. I really need rest," he said he understood. At 2:47 a.m. I woke up to someone stroking my face. It scared the life out of me. I jumped up, heart pounding, and there was Chase. Kneeling by my side of the bed with his phone flashlight on, he said, whispering, "Hey babe, I couldn't sleep, can you help me fall asleep?" I just stared at him in disbelief. "Are you serious right now?" He looked embarrassed but kept talking. "I tried everything, melatonin, breathing, counting sheep. Nothing's working. Just talk to me a bit." I lost it, like, full-blown lost it. I yelled, "Chase, it's almost 3 in the morning. What the hell is wrong with you?" He looked stunned, like he didn't understand why I was angry. I told him I was exhausted, that he was being selfish, and that I couldn't keep functioning like this. He mumbled, "I didn't mean to bother you," and walked out. Looking hurt, the next morning, he didn't say a word to me. I went to work feeling awful, both from lack of sleep and from the guilt of yelling, but I crushed my presentation and came home just wanting peace. Instead, I found Chase sitting on the couch. Distant, when I asked what was wrong, he said, "You didn't have to yell. You made me feel like a burden." I told him I was sorry for yelling, but that he needed to understand it wasn't just one bad night. It's been months. He said I overreacted, and that, if the roles were reversed, he'd never scream at me for needing help. That line made me snap again. I said, "You don't need help, Chase. You need to respect boundaries. I can't fix your insomnia, and you can't drag me into it every night." He got defensive, saying, "Wow, so I'm a burden now, got it." Then he grabbed his keys and left. He stayed at his brother's place for 2 nights. During that time, I slept better than I have in months. I didn't realize how heavy the exhaustion had been until I woke up one morning feeling human again when he came back. He apologized for leaving abruptly, but still insisted I shouldn't have yelled. I agreed I could have handled it better, but I also told him that if this keeps happening, I don't know how we can live together. He promised to work on it, and to be fair, he did, for a while. He started taking sleep supplements, meditating, even seeing a therapist about his anxiety. I was hopeful, but slowly the late-night whispers crept back. The gentle taps on my shoulder, the soft, "You up?" At 2:30 a.m. one night he woke me because he thought he heard a noise outside. I got up, checked, and there was nothing. Then he said, "While you're up, can we talk about something that's been on my mind?" That's when I realized this isn't just insomnia. It's him not being able to be alone with his thoughts. And instead of dealing with that himself, he pulls me into it. I'm torn. I love him. But I'm starting to dread bedtime. I literally get anxious when I hear him shifting beside me because I know he might wake me again. I've started sleeping with earplugs and a white noise app, but it doesn't always help. I don't want to be the angry, yelling girlfriend. I want to be supportive. But how do you support someone who refuses to respect your basic need for rest? He keeps saying it's not a big deal, but it is. It's affecting my health, my work, and how I feel about him. I'm tired, in every sense of the word. Last night, when he woke me again around 3 a.m. to ask if I thought the ceiling fan sounded weird, I didn't yell this time. I just got out of bed, grabbed my pillow, and went to sleep in the guest room. He followed me there, confused, asking, "What are you doing?" I said, "Trying to sleep. You should try it sometime." He didn't say anything, just stood there in the doorway for a while before going back to bed. This morning, I found a note on the counter that said, "Sorry if I'm hard to live with. I'll try to stop waking you. I just hate the silence at night." And that's when I started crying. Because I know he means it. But I also know he won't change unless he really faces whatever's causing this. And I can't fix that for him. I love him, but I also love sleeping, and at this point, I don't know which one I'm willing to lose. Update. My boyfriend and I finally talked about why he keeps waking me up, and I learned more than I expected. It's been about 2 months since I posted, and I didn't think I'd come back here. I honestly thought the whole waking me up issue would either fade out or quietly break us apart. But things changed, slowly, awkwardly, and sometimes painfully. After the night I moved into the guest room, Chase didn't try to wake me again. For a few days it was almost peaceful. We talked in the mornings, ate breakfast, but there was this weird tension. Like we were walking on eggshells, he'd ask, "Did you sleep okay?" And I'd answer, "Yes," and we'd both pretend nothing was wrong. But of course it was, after about a week. I told him we needed to talk. Really talk. I was tired of pretending everything was fine when we were basically living in quiet frustration. We sat on the couch one Sunday morning, coffee mugs between us, sunlight pouring in through the blinds, and I told him, "This can't keep happening. I'm exhausted, and it's starting to make me resent you." He looked genuinely hurt, but didn't get defensive this time. He said softly, "I know I've been trying, but it's like my brain won't shut off at night. And when I see you next to me sleeping, it makes me feel alone." I didn't know what to say to that at first. He looked vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. Then he told me something I didn't expect. That he's been dealing with nighttime anxiety since he was a kid. Apparently, when he was around 10, his parents went through a nasty divorce. His dad used to leave at night after arguments, and he'd wake up and find him gone. Since then, he's hated nighttime silence because it reminds him of that. Of being left alone and powerless. He said, "I guess somewhere in my head, I associate being awake at night with being safe. Like if I stay awake, bad things can't happen. And when I see you sleeping, it feels like I'm the only one awake in the world. And I panic. I just sat there stunned. Because suddenly all of it, the whispering, the need for me to be awake with him, the fear of silence, made sense. It didn't make it okay, but it made sense. I told him gently that while I understood, it wasn't fair to drag me into his fear. He nodded and said he knew. That he didn't want to be that guy who keeps his girlfriend from sleeping, but it's like his body betrays him. He'd already been seeing a therapist for general anxiety, but after that talk, he started focusing specifically on his nighttime issues. His therapist suggested cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBTI, and grounding techniques. He also got prescribed a low-dose medication to help him regulate sleep. For a while, it actually worked. He started journaling before bed, leaving his phone in the kitchen, and using a weighted blanket. He even set a rule for himself: no touching me after 10 p.m. unless it's an emergency. The first few nights, he was twitchy, restless, but he kept his distance. I, on the other hand, slept like a rock. It was the first time in months that I woke up without dark circles. Then something unexpected happened. I started missing him in bed. Not the insomnia version of him, but the comfort of just having him close. When I rolled over and saw the space between us, I realized how distant we'd become, emotionally and physically. So one night, I scooted closer and put my hand on his back. He stiffened for a second, then relaxed and whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't perfect, but it felt like progress. Over the next few weeks, we worked out a system. If he woke up and felt anxious, he'd quietly get up, go into the living room, and do breathing exercises or write down what was running through his mind. I told him if he ever really needed to talk, he could wake me. Once in a while, But no more middle-of-the-night rambling or tapping my shoulder because he was bored, and to his credit, he stuck to it. But it hasn't all been smooth. About 3 weeks ago, he had a setback. I woke up at 2:30 a.m. to him standing by the window, staring out into the dark. I asked what was wrong, and he said, "I just can't stop thinking something bad's going to happen." I didn't yell this time. I just told him, "Come back to bed. You're safe. I'm here." He climbed in, shaking, and eventually fell asleep holding my hand. The next morning he thanked me and said, "I don't know how you put up with me," I told him. "Because you're trying. That's the key difference now. He's trying. Before, it felt like I was being dragged into his problem. Now it feels like he's fighting his way out of it. And I'm not perfect either." I had to admit to myself that yelling at him that night wasn't just about being woken up. It was about feeling ignored and disrespected for months. I should have set firmer boundaries earlier instead of letting resentment build until it exploded. Now, we've both made changes. I keep a white noise machine by the bed for him, and he goes to therapy twice a week. We also started taking evening walks together before bed, just talking about our days. No phones. It helps him wind down, and it helps us reconnect. Do I still get frustrated sometimes? Yes, there are nights he fidgets, sighs, or whispers to himself, and I feel my irritation bubble up. But now, instead of yelling or storming off, I remind myself he's not doing it to me. He's fighting his own battle. We've even talked about separate bedrooms in the future if it gets bad again. And surprisingly, that idea doesn't scare me anymore. Sometimes love isn't about constant closeness. It's about respect, patience, and rest. Literal rest. It's funny. I came here months ago angry, exhausted, and wondering if our relationship could survive something as small as a sleep issue. Now I realize it wasn't small at all. It was just a symptom of something deeper: fear, trauma, and a lack of communication. And maybe this is too sentimental, but the other night, I woke up briefly around 3 a.m. and saw him sitting quietly on the edge of the bed. Looking out the window, my first instinct was annoyance. But then I heard him whisper, almost to himself, "It's okay, you're safe. Go back to sleep." And for the first time, I realized he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to himself. So, I did go back to sleep, smiling a little, because I knew he was finally learning how to comfort himself. Final update: learning how to love someone who can't sleep, and how to stop losing yourself trying to fix them. It's been nearly 8 months since my last update, and the truth is, our lives look very different now. Some of that is because of growth, some because of loss, and some because of finally understanding that love doesn't mean never letting go. Sometimes it just means letting each other breathe. After the last post, things between Chase and me stayed mostly stable for a while. He was sticking with therapy, and we both worked on being more intentional about communication. He still had restless nights here and there, but they were fewer. I was sleeping better, functioning better, and for the first time in ages, we felt like a team again, instead of two exhausted people trapped in the same cycle. But as months passed, I started to notice something subtle. The energy between us had changed. He was getting better, yes, but he was also drifting. It wasn't in a bad way, more like he was rediscovering himself outside of the dependency he'd built around me. He started volunteering at a local animal shelter on weekends. Something he said made him feel calm. He reconnected with old friends, picked up photography again, and started sleeping in a bit later on his own. It was beautiful to see. I was proud of him, but it also made me realize something about myself. I had built so much of my identity around managing his anxiety that when he started healing, I didn't quite know what to do with the space that opened up one night. As we were getting ready for bed, he asked, "Do you ever miss how we used to be?" I said, "Sometimes, but I don't miss how tired I was." He laughed, a soft, genuine laugh, and said, "Fair." Then he added, "I don't miss being scared all the time either." We were quiet for a while after that. Lying in bed under the soft hum of the white noise machine, it felt peaceful. Then he said, "You know, I think I'm ready to live alone for a bit." It wasn't said harshly. He wasn't breaking up with me in that moment. He was saying it gently, with gratitude. He explained that therapy was helping him realize how much he'd relied on me emotionally. How every time he woke me at night, it wasn't just anxiety. It was fear that I'd disappear like people had before. He said, "You've given me so much comfort, but I think I need to learn how to create that on my own. I want to be someone who adds to your peace, not takes it away." I didn't cry right then. I just nodded because I knew he was right. We'd reached a point where staying together out of routine would have been easier. but it wouldn't have been honest. A few weeks later, he found a small apartment downtown. It was cozy, full of light, and when I helped him move in, I could tell he was excited but nervous. The first night he slept there, he texted me at 11:30 p.m. "It's weird, but I'm okay." I smiled at my phone in bed, the room quiet except for my dog snoring at the foot of it. For the first time in a long while, I didn't dread the silence. We still saw each other. Dinner once a week, sometimes a walk on Sundays. It wasn't romantic in the old sense, but there was a deep tenderness between us, the kind that only comes when you've walked through something hard together. A few months later, he told me he'd stopped needing the medication. He was sleeping 6 to 7 hours a night now. "I still have bad nights," he said, "but I don't wake anyone up anymore." That made me laugh. And I said, "That's growth." He smiled and said, "No, that's therapy." By then, we had naturally drifted into friendship. No hard breakup, no bitterness. Just mutual understanding that what we had done its job. We'd both taught each other something about love, patience, and letting go. And me? I started focusing on myself again. I signed up for a pottery class, went back to running in the mornings, and redecorated my bedroom. I changed my bedding. No more white sheets. I went for sage green, and replaced the old white noise machine with a small Bluetooth speaker that played rain sounds. It was my space again, and for the first time in years, it felt fully mine. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about that night he woke me by touching my face, and instead of anger, I just feel empathy. Because now I understand, he wasn't trying to annoy me or disrespect me. He was reaching out from a place of fear, hoping I could anchor him. But the truth is, no one can anchor someone else forever. Sooner or later, they have to find their own footing. Last week, I bumped into him at a farmer's market. He looked good, rested, lighter. He was there with his camera, taking pictures of some local band. We hugged, chatted for a while. I told him I was happy to see him doing well, and he said, "You look happy too. Peace suits you." It made me smile because it was true. That night, I slept with the windows open and the rain pouring softly outside. No interruptions, no midnight whispers, no fear of being woken. Just quiet. And I realized that's what this whole journey was about. Not just sleep, but peace. Peace with him, peace with myself. Peace with the fact that sometimes love doesn't end in forever, but it still changes you for the better. Sometimes people come into your life to teach you how to rest. And sometimes, you have to let them go so both of you finally can. And me? I finally sleep through the night. Stories number 9. My dad thinks I'm the problem because I won't pretend everything's fine. When I was 12, my mom died of breast cancer. My dad, Mark, handled it in the worst way possible, by pretending nothing happened. Within a year, he was dating a woman named Teresa. By year 2, they were married. I was 14, angry, and felt like my mom's memory got erased overnight. Teresa had a daughter, Lily, who was 5 at the time. She was sweet, clingy, and adored my dad. He treated her like gold, which would have been fine if he hadn't acted like I didn't exist. It was little things at first, forgetting to come to my choir recital, skipping my birthday dinner because Lily had a cold, things like that. But it added up. When I was 16, he missed my state championship swim meet. His reason? Lily had a dance recital. I remember sitting on the bus home crying, staring at the empty seat where he said he'd be. After that, I stopped trying. I got a job, saved money, and when I turned 18, I moved out. We barely talked for years. He'd text sometimes around holidays, or send a happy birthday with a balloon emoji. But that was about it. I didn't have it in me to fake a relationship with someone who replaced me with a ready-made family. Fast forward to now, I'm 25, have my own apartment, a stable job, and a good group of friends. Life's not perfect, but it's peaceful. Then earlier this year, Dad started reaching out more. He said he missed me and wanted to rebuild. At first, I was open to it. We met for lunch, caught up, and it wasn't terrible. But slowly, Teresa and Lily started coming into the picture again. Dad would accidentally invite me over when they were home, or guilt me for not being there on holidays. Lily's now 9, and honestly she's a great kid. She calls me Jess, and I don't mind that she likes me. But I can't handle how my dad keeps trying to shove us together like we're supposed to be sisters. Every time I visit, he forces us into family time activities, board games, dinner photos, whatever. One night, we were all watching a movie at his house. I was polite but quiet. Lily kept asking me to play, and I gently said, "Maybe later, kiddo." Dad paused the movie and said, in front of everyone, "Jess, can you try to be kinder? She looks up to you, I wanted to scream. I'm not cruel to her. But I'm not going to pretend we're one big happy family. Later that night, I told him I didn't appreciate being called out like that. He got defensive, said I was being cold and that Lily didn't deserve to feel my resentment. I told him I don't resent her. I resent him. He told me that's not fair, that Lily shouldn't have to pay for my issues. That's when I snapped. I told him I've been paying for his choices since I was 14, that he doesn't get to erase the damage he did just because he suddenly wants to play dad again. Teresa tried to intervene, saying, "She's just a child." "Jessica," and I said, "Yeah, and I was too. When you both decided I didn't matter anymore." The room went dead quiet. I left. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, Dad has been blowing up my phone. First, it was guilt-trippy messages. "You're hurting Lily. She doesn't understand why you don't want to see her." Stuff like that. Then it turned into anger. "You're selfish. You need to grow up. You're not the only one who lost someone." I finally texted him back and said, "Stop using her as your emotional shield. She's not my responsibility. You are the adult who needs to explain your choices." He didn't reply after that. Last week, my aunt, his sister, called me and said I should put my pride aside and go visit for Lily's birthday, because she didn't do anything wrong. I told her I know that, but I'm not putting myself in situations where I'm treated like the problem for having boundaries. She sighed and said, "You know, it's been 10 years. Don't you think it's time to let it go?" But here's the thing. I have let it go. I'm not sitting around angry or bitter. I just don't want to be forced into pretending we're a family when the foundation isn't there. I don't hate Lily, but I'm not her big sister. I'm the daughter my dad walked away from. Every time I see them, I feel like I'm watching someone else live the life that should have been mine. And it hurts, no matter how much therapy or time passes. The last straw was when my dad showed up at my apartment last weekend. He had Lily with him. "I didn't even know they were coming," he said. "We were in the area and wanted to stop by." I invited them in out of politeness, but I was tense. Lily wandered around, complimenting my cat and asking if she could see my room. I smiled and said maybe another time. Dad gave me a look like I'd just kicked a puppy. After they left, he texted me, "You're making her feel like she's done something wrong. You need to stop taking your issues with me out on a child." That was it. I blocked him because I'm not taking anything out on her. I'm just not playing along with his fantasy version of what our relationship should be. If he really wanted to rebuild things, he'd start with me, not the picture-perfect step-family he keeps parading around like a reset button. I've spent years learning how to protect my peace. I'm not losing that again to make my dad comfortable. I wish him well. I hope Lily grows up happy. But I'm done being the stand-in daughter he remembers only when it fits his narrative. Sometimes healing means walking away, not because you hate them, but because you finally realized love shouldn't always have to hurt this much. Update. It's been about 6 months since I last saw my dad, and things have shifted in ways I didn't expect. Some for the better, some not so much after I blocked him. There was silence for a while. No calls, no texts, nothing. I thought that meant he finally understood I needed space. But then my aunt messaged me again in late spring. She said Dad had been heartbroken, and that I should at least talk to him, for Lily's sake. I ignored it at first, but then she mentioned that Lily had started asking a lot of questions about me. Why I didn't visit. If she did something wrong, why Jess doesn't like me anymore. That broke me a little. So, against my better judgment, I decided to reach out. But on my terms. I texted my dad and said I'd meet him for coffee, just the two of us. He agreed right away. When I walked into the cafe, I could tell he was nervous. He looked older, smaller somehow. He started with small talk, asking about work and my apartment. But I told him I didn't come to pretend everything was fine. I told him I needed to talk about the past if there was going to be any future. He sighed and said, "Jess, I know I wasn't perfect, but can't we move on?" And that hit me the wrong way. I said, "You keep saying that like it's a switch I can flip. I'm not stuck in the past. I'm trying to deal with the fact that you never did." We talked for nearly 2 hours. I told him about how invisible I felt as a teenager. How every time he missed something important for me, it chipped away at the little trust I had left. He didn't interrupt, which was new. He actually listened. When I finished, he said quietly, "I didn't realize how much damage I did by trying to avoid my own grief." He said that when Mom died, he felt like everything good in his life vanished. And when Teresa came along with a cheerful little girl, it gave him something to focus on. Something that didn't remind him of pain. I thought I was protecting you by not making you talk about it, he said. But I see now I just left you alone with it. I'll be honest. I cried. I didn't plan to, but the mix of sadness and relief just hit all at once. It wasn't full forgiveness, but it felt like a real start. We agreed to try something new. Slow contact, no family dinners, no surprise drop-ins, no play big sister expectations, just one-on-one time, rebuilding as adults. He promised to keep Lily out of it until I was ready. And for once, he actually followed through. Over the next few months, we met up maybe once or twice a month. Coffee, walks, sometimes just lunch in a park. It was awkward at first, but it got easier. He started opening up more about Mom, stories I'd never heard before. Like how she used to sneak out of work to surprise him at lunch, or how she once burned an entire batch of Christmas cookies because she thought sugar and salt were the same thing. Hearing those little details made me feel closer to both of them again. But it wasn't all smooth around July. Teresa texted me from a number I didn't recognize. She said she appreciated me making peace, but that she hoped I'd start including Lily again soon. She added, "She really misses you." I didn't respond. I didn't owe her an explanation. I screenshotted it and sent it to Dad, and to his credit, he apologized and said he'd handle it. A few days later, he told me he talked to Teresa and told her to stop involving me. He said, "You deserve to have a relationship with me without feeling like you're being forced into something." That was the first time he's ever stood up for me like that. Then, out of nowhere, Lily sent me a handwritten letter. It showed up at my apartment in a pink envelope with stickers all over it. The handwriting was messy but sweet. She said, "Hi Jess, I miss you. Dad says you're busy, but I hope you can come to my next dance recital. I drew a picture of you and me and Daisy the cat." I didn't know what to do with it. I sat on my couch and stared at that letter for a long time. She's just a kid, innocent in all of this. And I don't want her growing up thinking I hate her. So, I wrote back, I kept it light, I told her I liked her drawing, that Daisy is still fluffy and lazy, and that I hope her recital goes great. I didn't say I'd come, but I didn't shut the door either. When Dad found out, he thanked me. He said it meant a lot to Lily and to him. And that's when I realized something had shifted. Not just in him, but in me too. For years, I carried around this tight, angry knot in my chest whenever I thought about him. But now it's softer. Not gone, but softer. I don't forget what happened, and I don't excuse it, but I can finally see that he's trying. Not performatively, not to look good in front of others, but genuinely trying. We've even started talking about Mom more openly. He asked if I wanted to visit her grave together next month. I said yes. As for Teresa, I still keep my distance. She's polite when she texts me happy holidays or birthday wishes. But I don't initiate anything, and I'm okay with that. Lily called me once recently, just to tell me she got a new puppy. I smiled through the whole call. I didn't feel resentment or guilt, just warmth. I guess what I've learned through all of this is that healing doesn't mean pretending the hurt never happened. It means letting it exist without letting it control you. For the first time in a long time, I think we might actually get to a place where everyone can coexist without the weight of what used to be crushing every interaction. We're not there yet, but we're closer than we've ever been. And for now, that's enough. Final update. It's been almost a year since my last post, and for the first time in a long time, things actually feel steady, not perfect, but real. My dad and I never had a huge, "we're all good now" moment. It wasn't like that. It was more like a gradual shift. We started talking more regularly, meeting up for breakfast once or twice a month, and over time, it stopped feeling like a performance. There were no more awkward pauses or careful phrasing to avoid landmines. It just felt like two people trying, quietly, to rebuild what they lost. We finally did visit my mom's grave together. That day hit me harder than I expected. It was a crisp fall morning, the leaves just starting to change. He brought flowers, lilies, my mom's favorite, and for a while, we just stood there in silence. I think that was the first time we'd both allowed ourselves to grieve together instead of separately. When we finally talked, it wasn't about the past in a blaming way. It was more like acknowledging the ghosts that had been between us for so long. He told me he regretted not being stronger after Mom died, that he should have been there for me instead of hiding behind a new life. I told him I'd stopped expecting him to ever admit that, and that hearing it meant more than he probably realized. After that, things got easier. He's been consistent for the first time in my adult life. He doesn't pressure me to come over, doesn't push the family thing. He checks in without guilt tripping me. Sometimes it's a text about a new restaurant he tried. Sometimes it's a picture of Lily doing something goofy. It's simple but genuine. And Lily, God, that kid. I finally saw her again a few months ago. It wasn't planned. She was at the house when I stopped by to drop off a birthday gift for Dad. She came running out the front door yelling, "Jess, you came," and hugged me like no time had passed. It was bittersweet. She's older now, 10, and I can already see the kind of person she's growing into. Funny, kind, a little dramatic, and completely unaware of the complicated history that shaped her family. I think that's a good thing. She asked if I'd come to her dance recital next month, and for the first time I said yes, not because I felt obligated or guilty, but because I wanted to. I talked to my therapist about it later. She said it sounds like I've reached a point where I can engage from a place of peace instead of pain. I think she's right. I even had a surprisingly decent conversation with Teresa recently. It was at Dad's birthday dinner. She pulled me aside in the kitchen and said she knows she hasn't always made things easy, but that she's glad we're in a better place. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told her I still carry hurt from how things went down when I was a teenager, but that I appreciate her saying that. She nodded and said, "You were just a kid. We all could have handled things better." It wasn't some big reconciliation moment, but it was enough. Enough to make peace with the part of me that still sometimes wonders why nobody fought for me back then. The biggest change, though, is that I don't feel invisible anymore. My dad makes an effort now to show up. For me, he came to see the small gallery where some of my photography was displayed. He actually stood there and listened when people complimented my work. On the way home, he said, "I didn't realize how much I've missed of your life," I told him. "It's not too late to start showing up now." And he just smiled and said, "I plan to. We'll never have the kind of father-daughter relationship that's easy or picture-perfect. There's too much history for that. But what we have now is honest, and that's worth more than pretending the past didn't happen." As for Lily, I've come to realize she's not a reminder of what I lost. She's proof that healing can still happen in small, unexpected ways. I'm not her sister, but I am someone in her life who cares about her, and that feels right. She deserves that, and honestly, so do I. There's still a lot of work ahead. I'm still learning how to hold boundaries without guilt, how to love without fear of being replaced. But I can finally say that I don't carry the same anger anymore. I've made peace with the fact that my dad's love might have been flawed, but it was still love. And sometimes, people can learn how to love better when they're given the chance. If you'd told me 2 years ago that I'd ever be able to sit across from him, laughing over pancakes on a Saturday morning, I would have called you crazy. But life has a strange way of softening the edges when you finally stop trying to rewrite what happened and just accept it. So here I am, lighter, not entirely healed. Maybe, but healing, and that's more than enough. Stories number 10. You want me to do the job you fired me from? I don't think so. I worked for a small manufacturing company in Ohio called Brighton Tools for almost 6 years. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady work and paid the bills. We made industrial parts for construction equipment, small components like brackets, clamps, and hinges. I started as a floor technician and worked my way up to supervising the assembly line. The company was family-owned, and the owner, Greg, liked to act like we were all one big family. That was fine when things were going well, but when money got tight, he turned into a completely different person. He'd suddenly start watching the clock, questioning our breaks, and cutting corners on everything from overtime to basic maintenance. I stayed loyal. I'd worked my way up, knew the machines like the back of my hand, and trained half the people there myself. But as soon as Greg hired a new operations manager, everything changed. The new manager, a guy named Chase, came from some corporate background and was obsessed with efficiency metrics. The first day he walked the floor, he started pointing out things like, "Why are we using this process instead of that?" Or, "Why does this line take 42 minutes instead of 38? He didn't understand that we weren't some massive, automated factory. We had a small crew, aging equipment, and a workflow that ran like clockwork only because everyone there knew how to adapt when things went wrong. He didn't care. He wanted everything done his way. I tried to cooperate, but every suggestion he made just created more problems. He replaced a reliable supplier with a cheaper one, which led to defective parts. He changed shift schedules, which messed up production. And whenever something went wrong, guess who got blamed? Me. Then came the day I'll never forget. It was a Wednesday morning, halfway through our biggest order of the year. Parts for a major client we'd had for over a decade. A critical machine jammed up because of one of those cheap parts Chase insisted on using. The line had to stop for 2 hours while I fixed it. The next morning, Greg called me into his office. Chase was there, sitting beside him with that smug expression that made me want to put my fist through a wall. Greg said, "We've been reviewing your recent performance, and unfortunately, we think it's time to move in a different direction." I just stared at him. A different direction? "You're firing me?" Chase jumped in, pretending to be sympathetic. "It's nothing personal, man. We just need someone who's willing to work with new methods. The old system isn't cutting it anymore." I laughed. Actually laughed. "You mean the old system that's been keeping this company running for 10 years? The one that worked until you started cutting costs?" Greg's face tightened. "We appreciate your contributions, but this decision is final." So I walked out. No scene, no begging, I just cleared out my locker, said goodbye to my crew, and left. The next few weeks were rough. I had some savings, but I'd put a lot of time and pride into that job. Still, I wasn't about to mope around forever. I started picking up contract repair work, machine maintenance, assembly line troubleshooting, that kind of stuff. Word spread fast, and before long I was working more hours on my own than I ever did at Brighton. Then one day, about 4 months later, I got a voicemail. It was Greg. "Hey, Mike. Long time, listen, we've had some issues on the floor, and Chase mentioned you might be available to consult for a few days. Just to help get production back on track, we can pay your standard rate." I sat there staring at my phone for a good minute before laughing out loud. They fired me, and now they wanted me to come back as a contractor to fix their mess. I didn't respond right away. I wanted to think about how to play it. My gut said to ignore them, but another part of me wanted to hear the desperation in Greg's voice. So I called him the next day. "Hey, Greg," I said casually. "Got your message? What kind of issues are we talking about?" He sounded tired, frustrated. "Well, the new supervisor's having some trouble with the assembly line. We've had some delays, and the big client is threatening to pull their order. You know how critical that account is." "Oh, I remember," I said. "The same order we were working on when you fired me?" There was a pause. "Look, I know things didn't end great, but this isn't about that. It's just business." I leaned back in my chair, smirking. "Business, huh? Sure, I can come take a look. My consulting rate is $120 an hour, minimum of 8 hours per day plus travel." He hesitated. "That's a little steep." "Yeah," I said. "So is firing your most experienced supervisor and then needing him 4 months later. Take it or leave it." After a few seconds, he sighed. "Fine. Be here Monday morning." When I walked back into that building, it felt like déjà vu. Same machines, same smell of oil and metal, but a completely different energy. Chase was there, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He tried to act professional, but I could see the panic in his eyes. "Hey, Mike," he said weakly. "Glad you could make it." I nodded. "Let's get to work." Within 30 minutes, I could see exactly what had gone wrong. They'd changed the calibration settings on 2 of the main machines, which caused a chain reaction that threw off the entire workflow. Parts weren't aligning, output was down, and half the crew was confused because the new efficiency process made everything worse. I fixed the first machine, then the second, showed the crew how to reset the process properly. By the end of the day, production was running smoother than it had in months. Greg came down to the floor to check in. "Wow, looks like you still know your stuff." I just smiled. "Guess the old system still works after all." He chuckled awkwardly, then said, "Listen, we might be interested in bringing you back on full-time, if you're open to it." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Greg, I appreciate the offer, but I don't think I could work under someone who doesn't value experience until it's too late." He looked embarrassed. "Fair enough." I packed up my tools and walked out, but not before sending my invoice. 8 hours at $120 an hour. 2 days later, I got the payment and a short email from Greg that said, "Thanks again for your help. We'll be in touch." I never heard from them again. A few months later, I ran into one of my old co-workers at a diner. He told me Chase had been let go after losing that big client for good, apparently. They couldn't meet the production quota even after I fixed the machines because Greg refused to bring me back to oversee things. Their loss, meanwhile, my little contracting business has grown like crazy. I've got 3 steady clients, I set my own hours, and I make almost double what I did at Brighton. Sometimes I drive past the old building and see the faded company sign out front, and I think about how funny it is that they fired me for not fitting into their new vision, only to end up calling me when everything fell apart. So yeah, when they asked me to come back and fix their mess, I did, but only because I knew I'd get the last laugh. And I did update. It's been about 6 months since I did that consulting stint for Brighton Tools, and honestly, it's been a wild ride reflecting on the whole thing. After I left, I didn't really think about them much. I was too busy growing my contracting business, picking up new clients, and finally enjoying work on my own terms. But small things kept reminding me of how ridiculous the situation with Greg and Chase had been. For starters, the word got around the local industry pretty fast. A few vendors I work with mentioned that Brighton Tools had been struggling ever since I walked out the second time. Apparently, after I fixed the machines, they tried to continue without me, and production fell apart again within a month. Chase was still there, floundering, and Greg was spending all his time scrambling to save accounts. The same big client that almost got lost before ended up giving them an ultimatum: either fix the processes or they'd pull all their business. I heard through the grapevine that Greg called in emergency temp supervisors from other companies, paying them extra just to train the crew. It cost him a fortune, and he apparently had multiple heated arguments with Chase about why we didn't keep Mike on board and why we didn't listen. Honestly, I can't say I felt bad. I had warned him after all. Experience matters. One day, about 3 months ago, I got a call from one of my old coworkers, a guy named Trevor. He'd been a line worker when I left. "Hey Mike," he said, hesitating. "I don't know if you want to hear this, but things are bad over here." I raised an eyebrow. "Go on," he sighed. "Yeah, it's chaos. Chase messed up the scheduling again. Greg's freaking out, and the big client is threatening to take their business elsewhere. They actually mentioned your name. Said you were the only one who knew how to run the line properly." I chuckled. "Guess I'm famous," Trevor laughed. "More like infamous. I mean, they want to hire you back. But you'd never do that, right?" I shook my head. "Nope, not going back. I fixed it once. I'm not getting sucked into that circus again." Trevor laughed, then got serious. "Just so you know, everyone here still talks about how you handled things. People respect you. Even some of the newer guys say it's the reason the line ever runs at all." That actually felt good. It wasn't about the money or the revenge. It was about being acknowledged for doing a good job. Around that same time, I noticed that my contracting business was picking up even more. Word spread that I was the guy who could fix things no one else could. Companies in surrounding towns started calling me to troubleshoot assembly lines, repair faulty machines, and train crews. I started traveling a bit, which was new for me but exciting. One week, I got a text from Greg. I almost deleted it without reading. But curiosity got the better of me. "Mike, I know you probably don't want to deal with us again, but we're in a bind. Can you at least give some advice over the phone? We're desperate." I stared at it for a minute, then typed back, "Greg, I'm glad you're surviving, but I've moved on. I can offer one piece of advice. Listen to your experienced staff before you try to reinvent the wheel. Best of luck." I didn't hear back. Not that I expected to. Fast forward a couple of months. I was at a local trade show for industrial manufacturing. Guess who I ran into? Chase. He looked older, tired, and more stressed than ever. "Mike," he said, sounding a little embarrassed, "I didn't expect to see you here." "Likewise," I replied with a smirk. He paused, then sighed. "I just wanted to say, you were right about everything. I didn't know what I was doing, and I messed up big time." I nodded. "Glad you figured it out." He looked at me, almost pleading, "If you ever want to consult, even just part-time, we'd pay top dollar." I laughed outright this time. "Chase, I'm running my own business now. I don't need to fix your messes anymore. Learn from your mistakes. That's the only way you'll survive." He looked down, nodded, and walked away. It was oddly satisfying. Not because I wanted to see him fail, but because it reinforced that I made the right choice leaving. Loyalty only gets you so far when the people in charge refuse to recognize it. Since then, I've been thriving. My crew has grown. My reputation in the industry has skyrocketed, and I finally feel in control of my career. I don't wake up dreading meetings with people who don't appreciate me. I set my own schedule, I pick my own clients, and I finally get to decide how much my time is worth. Sometimes I think about Brighton Tools, Greg, Chase, the old machines, and I shake my head. What could have been stressful turned into one of the best career moves I ever made. So yeah, when they asked me to do the job I was fired from, I didn't think so, and I never will. Final update. It's been over a year and a half since I walked away from Brighton Tools, and I can honestly say this chapter is finally closed, for good this time. Looking back, it's wild how everything unfolded, and how the same situation that felt like a disaster ended up being a blessing in disguise. After the trade show encounter with Chase, I got busy with my own work. My contracting business kept growing. I now have a small team of 3 technicians working with me full-time, and we've taken on projects across 3 states. The work is challenging, sure, but it's rewarding because we're solving real problems and being appreciated for it. My reputation has spread, and I'm finally earning what I'm worth, without dealing with toxic management or corporate nonsense. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on Brighton Tools from a distance, mostly through old co-workers and industry contacts. Apparently, things didn't improve much. Chase was eventually let go after a series of costly mistakes, and Greg finally started to realize he couldn't run the company without listening to experienced employees. Ironically, the big client I helped them save the first time ended up giving them a final warning before cutting ties entirely because the production issues persisted. One day, I got an email from Greg, not a call this time. It was short and almost apologetic, Mike. I want to acknowledge your contributions to Brighton Tools. We didn't handle things well, and I regret letting you go. I hope your business is thriving. I stared at it for a moment, then chuckled. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. The point wasn't to gloat or get closure from him. It was about recognizing my own growth and success. A few months later, I ran into one of my old floor technicians, a guy named Alex, at a local parts expo. He looked relieved and happy to see me. He said, "Mike, you have no idea how much better things are for everyone who stayed after you left. We finally started getting the support we needed, and your training stuck. You left a legacy here." That actually hit me in a way I didn't expect. I didn't leave out of spite. I left because I knew my worth and refused to be undervalued. But knowing that I'd also indirectly helped my former team succeed felt like the cherry on top. And then there was the final bit of poetic justice. A mutual industry contact told me that Brighton Tools had tried to recruit another contractor to replace me after I refused their offer. This person apparently didn't last a month before quitting in frustration. Meanwhile, my own team and I had already completed multiple high-profile projects, some of which involved the same machinery and processes I used to manage. In other words, I was thriving while they were still scrambling to stay afloat. Sometimes I think about the moment Greg and Chase called me to fix the line the first time. At the time, it felt like a strange mix of validation and insult. Now, it's a story I tell younger technicians and clients about why it's important to know your value and stand your ground. Experience is irreplaceable, and no one should take it for granted. I also finally feel free from the emotional roller coaster of wondering if I should forgive, forget, or play nice. I don't resent them. I just don't need them in my life anymore. That freedom has made a bigger difference than any raise, promotion, or bonus ever could. Looking back, the whole experience taught me a lot. Value your experience and trust your instincts. Don't let fear of confrontation keep you from standing up for yourself. Sometimes, the best revenge is building a life so good that your absence is felt everywhere. And maybe most importantly, your career is yours to steer. You don't owe anyone loyalty if they don't reciprocate it. So yeah, when they asked me to do the job I was fired from, I didn't think so. I still don't. But I did take it as a challenge, and it reminded me of something critical. I'm capable, resourceful, and in control of my own path. Every time I see a Brighton Tools shipment come across social media or in industry newsletters, I smile. Not out of schadenfreude, but because I know the story behind it. And more importantly, I know how far I've come since. I didn't just survive being fired and undervalued. I thrived. And that, more than anything, is the final victory. Stories number 11. The day I made a rude kid give up his train seat. I take the commuter train to work every weekday. An hour each way from the suburbs into downtown Chicago. It's not glamorous, but it's consistent. You learn the rhythm of it. The same faces, the same coffee smells, the quiet nods between half-awake strangers. It's not a social space. It's a peace zone before the chaos of the day. That morning was colder than usual. The kind of November cold that bites through layers. I was carrying 2 bags. My laptop satchel and a small tote with a homemade casserole because we were doing a potluck at the office. I boarded at my usual stop around 7:15 a.m. The train was packed as usual, but I managed to squeeze on. As I stepped into the car, I noticed an older woman, maybe in her 70s, holding onto the pole near the door. Her knuckles were white from gripping so hard, and she looked uncomfortable. The car was full of people sitting and pretending not to see her. Noses buried in phones. I felt that familiar frustration rise up. I'm not some self-appointed manners police, but come on. She had a cane hooked over her wrist. It was obvious she needed a seat. A few rows down, I saw this teenage boy, maybe 16 or 17, sitting comfortably with headphones on, sprawled across his seat like it was a recliner. His backpack was taking up the spot next to him. He had that look, the bored, "Don't bother me" look that only teenagers seem to perfect. The woman looked like she was about to ask someone to move, but she stopped, probably out of politeness. I hate that. How older people feel like they're inconveniencing others just by existing. So I walked over, balanced my tote, and tapped the boy's shoulder. He didn't look up. I tapped again, a little firmer. Finally, he pulled off one side of his headphones. "What?" he said, flat, annoyed. I gestured to the older woman. "Hey, could you give up your seat for her?" He blinked, like I'd asked him to solve a calculus problem. Then he said, "She can ask me herself." I felt my jaw tighten. "She shouldn't have to," I said. "You see, she's struggling," he shrugged. "Not my problem." At that point, people nearby were watching but saying nothing. The usual silent commuter audience. The older woman started shaking her head, murmuring, "It's fine, dear. Don't worry." But I was already annoyed beyond reason. "No, it's not fine," I said, turning back to the kid. "You're sitting here like you own the car while a 70-year-old woman is standing with a cane." He smirked and put his headphones back on. "Guess she should have gotten here earlier." Something in me just snapped. Maybe it was the months of stress at work. Maybe it was the way everyone just looked away. But I couldn't stand that smug expression for another second. So I did something I normally wouldn't. I reached over, grabbed his backpack from the seat beside him, and plopped it into his lap. "Great. Now your bag has a seat too," I said, loud enough for half the car to hear. That got people's attention. The boy shot me a glare, pulled off his headphones completely, and said, "What's your problem?" I said, "My problem is basic decency." He looked around like he expected someone to defend him, but all he got were a few disapproving looks and one guy muttering, "Dude, give her the seat." Finally, with an exaggerated sigh, he stood up, muttering, "Whatever." The older woman looked mortified. She said softly, "Oh, I didn't mean to cause trouble." I smiled at her and said, "You're not causing trouble, ma'am. You deserve a seat." She thanked me and sat down. Clutching her cane, the boy leaned against the wall near the door. Arms crossed, glaring at me, I ignored him. The rest of the ride was quiet, except for the faint hum of his music. When we reached downtown, people started getting off. The older woman touched my arm as she passed and said, "Thank you, dear. My knees aren't what they used to be." I smiled. "You don't have to thank me. He should have known better." The boy overheard that and muttered, "You think you're a hero or something?" I turned to him and said, calm but firm, "No, I just think your parents failed you somewhere along the line." He gave me this nasty smirk and said, "You must be fun at parties," then stormed off. I thought that was the end of it. Until 2 days later I got on the same train. Same car, same route. Guess who was there? Yep, headphone boy. I saw him before he saw me. He was sitting near the window, and to my surprise, when an older man with a cane got on, the kid stood up immediately and offered his seat. No hesitation, the man thanked him and sat down. And the kid looked around like he wanted to make sure someone noticed. Our eyes met for half a second. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just gave this little nod, like, "Yeah, I get it now." I nodded back, and that was it. No words. Just quiet understanding. After that, I saw him a few more times over the next month. He always stood up for older passengers or women carrying heavy bags. Sometimes he'd even help someone lift luggage onto the overhead rack. He never looked my way again, but he didn't need to. It's strange. I wasn't trying to teach him a lesson that day. I was just tired of people being indifferent. But maybe sometimes you need someone to call you out in public to make you see how you're acting. That's the thing about those small public moments. They're like ripples. You don't always see the effect, but they're there. The woman I helped? I ran into her a month later at the grocery store near my office. She recognized me instantly, smiled, and said, "You were my train angel." I laughed and said, "Just a cranky commuter." She told me her name was Martha, and that she started taking a slightly earlier train to make sure she got a seat. "But lately," she said, "I haven't had to ask. People have been offering without me saying a word." That made me smile. Maybe that kid wasn't the only one who'd learned something that morning. Because here's the truth. Kindness is contagious, but so is apathy. When one person stands up, literally or figuratively, others take note. Sometimes all it takes is one uncomfortable moment, one confrontation, one person who refuses to look away. And I know there are bigger problems in the world than a rude teenager on a train. But when you start letting small things slide, like basic respect for others, it spreads. People stop caring. And I don't ever want to be someone who just shrugs and looks down at my phone while someone's grandmother clings to a metal pole for balance. So yeah, maybe I was a little extra that day. Maybe I embarrassed a teenager. But if it got him, and a few other people, to think twice the next time they saw someone in need, then I'll take that as a win. Now, every time I ride that same route, I still glance toward that seat by the window. Sometimes it's empty, sometimes it's not. But I always remember that morning, and how one small act of standing up, or making someone else stand up, can quietly change things more than you'd ever expect. Update: how a rude teen on the train ended up surprising me months later. It's been a few months since the infamous train incident with Headphone Boy. Let's call him Ryan, 16M. And honestly, I thought that was the last I'd see of him. I figured he'd gone back to his world of earbuds and teenage indifference, and I'd keep my seat vigilant for anyone who actually needed it. But life has this weird way of circling back. One Thursday morning, I boarded the same train, juggling my laptop bag and my usual oversized tote filled with work files. The car was crowded, as usual. I spotted Ryan almost immediately. Same hoodie, same backpack stuffed on the seat next to him. Headphones in, headphones out. Somewhere in that frustrating middle zone, I braced myself, fully expecting a repeat of that November incident. But this time, something was different. An older man, maybe in his 60s, with a walking cane, boarded the car. He looked tired, hunched over slightly, and scanned the seats nervously. Ryan, who was sitting near the door, immediately stood up and offered his seat. I froze. My jaw almost dropped. I wasn't sure if I'd misread him, or if the guy would even take the offer. The man smiled gratefully and lowered himself onto the seat. Ryan adjusted his backpack to the floor and gave a small nod in my direction. Like a silent, "I got it now," I couldn't believe it. That smug, indifferent kid who refused to move for the older woman months ago was now doing exactly what I had hoped he would. It was subtle, almost casual, but the growth was there. The fact that he even acknowledged me with that small nod. No smirk, no sarcastic comment, just recognition. Felt like a quiet victory. I caught myself smiling and then realized something else. People around us noticed too. A young woman sitting across from him leaned over and whispered a quick "thank you" to the older man as he sat down. Another commuter gave Ryan a small thumbs up. The ripple effect was real. Small, quiet, and undeniable. After a few stops, the train thinned out, and Ryan eventually got off before he did. He turned back toward the older man, who had just gotten up to leave. He offered a hand, saying, "Need help with that bag?" The man nodded, a little startled by the gesture from a teenager, but accepted. Ryan helped him, then got off the train with his headphones back in, backpack over one shoulder, and that same quiet confidence he hadn't had months ago. I sat there for a while watching the door close, and felt this strange mix of satisfaction and relief. It wasn't about me anymore. He hadn't done it because I'd yelled at him before. It wasn't for validation, and it wasn't performative. He did it because he chose to act differently. That morning, for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel tension, annoyance, or frustration on the train. I just felt peace. Later that week, I ran into the older woman from my original encounter. Let's call her Martha, 72F, at the grocery store near my office. She saw me, recognized me immediately, and waved. "You were my train angel," she said with a smile. I laughed and shook my head. "I'm just a cranky commuter." She waved it off. "Well, you taught someone something important that day. Ryan, I think his name is. He offered me his seat without hesitation last week. I've noticed he's been standing up for other people too, quietly, without a fuss. I didn't realize at first it was because of you." I felt my cheeks warm. It wasn't about me, really. But it was satisfying to see a tangible effect of one small act of standing up for decency. It got me thinking. Kindness and accountability are contagious, even in the most unexpected places. That moment on the train wasn't heroic. It wasn't dramatic. It was just a refusal to look away. And yet, months later, the ripple was still there. Now, every time I take that same train, I pay attention not just to who needs a seat, but to how people interact. I notice the small gestures. Someone offering a seat to a pregnant passenger, helping with luggage, or just acknowledging someone's struggle with a smile. And sometimes I catch a flash of Ryan, earbuds in, standing politely when someone needs the seat. And I can't help but grin because in a way, that one rude kid who refused to move became a reminder to me that change can happen quietly. One small action, one firm boundary, one refusal to accept indifference. It can ripple farther than you expect, And yes, maybe a little satisfaction comes from knowing that on that train, one kid finally learned how to stand up for someone else. But the bigger lesson? The ripple effect is worth more than the ego boost. Sometimes, it's not about winning a fight in the moment. It's about planting a seed and waiting to see who it grows in. Final update. How a small train confrontation quietly changed a teenager. And me. It's been about a year since the original train incident with Ryan, 16M, the teenage boy who refused to give up his seat. Honestly, I never expected to think about him this much after that day. But life has a funny way of reminding you that small actions can have lasting effects. A few months after the update I shared, I started noticing a pattern. Every morning on my commute, I'd see Ryan in the same train car, usually sitting near the middle or standing politely if the car was full. The difference wasn't dramatic. He didn't go out of his way to be noticed. But he had clearly internalized the lesson. When someone older, pregnant, or carrying a lot of bags boarded, he offered his seat immediately. No hesitation, no complaint, no eye rolls. He even helped people lift bags into the overhead racks when necessary. One morning, I noticed him helping a mother with a stroller while juggling his backpack and headphones. She waved at him with a grateful smile, and he just nodded, slipping quietly back to his seat. I caught his glance for a moment. No smirk, no defensiveness, just awareness. It felt satisfying, not because I had some claim to his change, but because I could see that he had grown into someone more considerate. Then, about 2 months ago, something happened that made me realize the ripple effect was bigger than I thought. The older woman from the first incident, Martha, 72F, came onto the train at my stop. This time, she wasn't struggling alone. She was with a friend, and she waved at me as I got on. I waved back, and she mouthed "thank you" with a bright smile. And then I noticed Ryan. He was standing near the door, looking around like he always did. But when he saw Martha, he immediately offered his seat. Before she even reached the row, the woman's friend smiled in surprise. Martha smiled wider. The subtle nod Ryan gave me as she sat down felt like a private acknowledgement between us. A silent confirmation that he hadn't just learned manners, he had absorbed empathy. That day I realized something important. Teaching kindness doesn't require grand gestures. Sometimes it's just about refusing to tolerate apathy and showing someone what basic decency looks like. Ryan hadn't needed a lecture, a punishment, or a dramatic confrontation. He needed an example and a boundary, a moment where someone refused to accept his rudeness. Over the months, I also noticed Ryan extending that consideration to people his own age. Teenagers are not always polite, but I saw him give up his spot to a pregnant teenager carrying multiple grocery bags. He helped a middle-aged man struggling with a briefcase and a cane. He wasn't trying to be noticed, he was just doing the right thing. I started reflecting on my own behavior too. That morning when I grabbed his backpack and made him stand, I wasn't proud of the yelling or the embarrassment. But I was proud that it sparked change. It reminded me that standing up for others matters. Even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient, sometimes I think about how many other Ryans there are out there. People who don't consider how their actions affect others until someone shows them. That train ride taught me that one small intervention can have lasting effects, and it doesn't need to be dramatic. It just needs to be consistent, honest, and compassionate. Ryan and I never became friends. We exchange polite nods when our eyes meet on the train, and that's enough. I don't need recognition or thanks. Watching him grow into someone considerate, silently, quietly, feels like its own reward. I've also taken lessons for myself. I make it a point to speak up when I see injustice, rudeness, or neglect in small ways, not to embarrass anyone, but to set an example. And when I see people, young or old, rise to meet that example, I know the world is a little better for it. So yes, maybe I embarrassed a teenager one cold November morning. Maybe I was extra, but seeing him now, thoughtful, aware, and quietly considerate, proves that sometimes being firm and standing up for what's right can ripple farther than you ever imagine. And every time I get on that train, glance at the seats, and see someone standing politely for another, I smile. Because I know one small act can quietly shift the way someone moves through the world. Stories number 12. My family got upset because I cooked for my grandparents, but not them. I just had surgery a few weeks ago, a minor procedure, nothing too serious, but it left me bedridden for a couple of days. My parents, my 2 younger siblings, and I all live in the same town, but for recovery, I stayed at my grandparents' house for about a week because they live closer to the clinic and could help me more easily. I was nervous about staying there alone, Since I'd need someone to drive me to follow-ups and help with meals while I couldn't really move around much, my grandparents, Diane and Robert, insisted I come stay with them. They live about 20 minutes away, but the house is quiet and I didn't have to worry about anyone rushing around. The thing is, my grandparents are amazing cooks, but they like to get creative. And sometimes I just like food that's simple and comforting when I'm recovering. So I started cooking small meals for them, mostly things like pasta, scrambled eggs, sandwiches, and a couple of casseroles. I figured it would make things easier on them since I wasn't feeling well and I wanted to contribute. After a couple of days, they started joking that I was acting like a personal chef, and I laughed along. Honestly, I was happy to do it. It was a way to feel normal and useful while stuck in recovery mode. Then, about midway through my stay, I got a text from my mom. She said something like, "We heard you're cooking for Grandma and Grandpa. That's great, but are you forgetting your own family?" At first, I thought she was joking. I replied with a laughing emoji and said, "I'm literally stuck at Grandma and Grandpa's house. Can't exactly cook here for everyone." But the texts kept coming. My younger sister, Emily, said she felt ignored because I didn't cook for her and my brother. Ryan, when I usually visit, my dad chimed in, asking if I was playing favorites or trying to prove something by cooking for my grandparents instead of them. I tried to explain. I told them I was recovering from surgery, that I stayed with my grandparents because they could help me, and that cooking for them was easier given the circumstances. I said I hadn't forgotten them at all and that I'd happily cook for them once I got back home. "That didn't go over well," my mom said. "It's not about forgetting, it's about priorities. Your grandparents are always getting special treatment, and now you're showing them more care than your own family." I was floored. I hadn't thought of it that way. My whole point was just that I was recovering and staying there temporarily. I wasn't choosing them over anyone. It got more tense when I finally got home. My siblings were sulky, and my mom made a comment about how it's always easier to please Grandma and Grandpa. My dad said nothing, just looked frustrated. I tried to laugh it off, saying I was sick, I couldn't really cook for everyone at once. But my explanation fell flat. I ended up cooking dinner for my family the next night to smooth things over. Spaghetti. Garlic bread and a salad my siblings ate, but I could tell the mood was off. My mom kept giving me the side eye like I was guilty of something. Honestly, I feel stuck. I don't think I did anything wrong. I was recovering and I stayed with my grandparents for practical reasons. Cooking for them didn't mean I cared any less about my parents or siblings. I even cooked for my family as soon as I was able. Now I keep thinking about whether I should have just not cooked at all while I was there, even though I genuinely wanted to help my grandparents, or if maybe I should have sent something back home to my family while I stayed there. I feel frustrated and guilty at the same time. Am I wrong for cooking for my grandparents while I was recovering instead of also cooking for my parents and siblings? Update. It's been a few weeks since I got home, and the tension hasn't completely gone away, though it's eased a bit. After the initial argument, I realized I needed to set some boundaries and clarify expectations with my family because the lingering guilt was starting to get to me. I sat down with my mom first, hoping for a calm conversation. I explained again that my main reason for staying at Grandma and Grandpa's house was practical. I needed help while I recovered. I reminded her that I wasn't choosing them over my own family, and that cooking for them was just a way to feel useful while I was limited in what I could do physically. I tried to be patient, because I could tell she felt hurt or left out. She sighed and said, "I understand that, but it still felt like you cared more about them than us." I paused, because I wanted her to really hear me. "Mom, I care about you and the kids every single day. Cooking for Grandma and Grandpa didn't mean I care less about you. I didn't cook for you because I was recovering, and because I was literally staying at their house. I was helping where I was," she nodded slowly. "And I think some of it sunk in." She didn't apologize, but she stopped bringing it up in a passive-aggressive way, which was progress. Next, I talked to my dad. He was easier to deal with, actually. He admitted he might have overreacted because he felt like he was losing control over family dynamics. He said, "I guess I just got caught up thinking you were picking sides." I told him I wasn't. I reassured him that the moment I was able, I cooked for everyone at home, and I'd do it again. He chuckled and said, "Well, at least we got a decent spaghetti dinner out of it." That made me smile. My siblings Emily and Ryan were trickier. They sulked for a few days, but eventually warmed up when I involved them in planning meals and letting them help in the kitchen. I realized part of the issue was that they felt excluded, not necessarily upset that I cooked for my grandparents. Once they got to help, The resentment faded. Emily even said, "I get it now. You were sick and staying at Grandma's, so of course you couldn't make dinner for us." Ryan just shrugged. But he was laughing by the time dinner was over. One thing I learned through this whole experience is that my family tends to assume intentions without asking. They automatically thought I was favoring my grandparents, even though my actions were completely situational. Communication was key here. I made sure to tell them why I was staying there, why I cooked for them, and that I never intended to make anyone feel left out. Since then, I've tried to be more proactive when I know I'll be spending time away from home. I've started sending texts or small meals back when I stay at someone else's place or go to events. It's not about guilt. It's about keeping everyone connected and making sure my family doesn't feel ignored. It's been helpful for everyone, including me, because I feel like I'm not constantly walking on eggshells. Honestly, this experience has made me realize that boundaries and communication are just as important as caring and actions. I can still help and care for others while making sure my own family doesn't feel left out, and I don't have to take on guilt unnecessarily. I'm not sure if they'll ever see the full perspective of what it felt like to be recovering and staying somewhere else, but that's okay, as long as I know my intentions were good. That's what matters. Right now, things are calmer. My parents aren't passive-aggressive when I mention helping Grandma and Grandpa, and my siblings actually asked me to cook with them last weekend. It felt nice, normal even. I guess the takeaway for me is that you can't always control how others perceive your actions, but you can explain yourself and maintain your boundaries, and sometimes, a little honesty goes a long way toward mending hurt feelings. Final update. It's been nearly 3 months since my surgery. And looking back, I feel like the whole situation with cooking and family expectations has taught me more than I expected. Things have really stabilized. And for the first time, I feel like I'm managing the balance between helping others and taking care of myself without constant guilt. After my last conversation with my mom and dad, things gradually returned to normal. I started visiting my grandparents less often, since I'm feeling stronger now and able to cook for myself. When I do visit, I still make a meal or two, but it's casual. Pasta, a casserole, or something simple. I don't overexert myself, and I make sure to communicate in advance what I'm able to do. That's made them appreciative without making it feel like I'm sacrificing my own recovery or time with my family. At home, I've established a new rhythm. I make a point of cooking at least one meal a week with Emily and Ryan, letting them help plan it and prep. It's been a fun way to bond, and it has completely eliminated the lingering resentment. Emily even asked me if she could help plan a family dinner night once a month. I said yes, of course. Ryan has started experimenting with small recipes on his own and proudly shows off what he makes. It's become something we all look forward to, rather than a source of tension. I also realized that part of the conflict wasn't just about who I cooked for. It was about feeling appreciated and included. My family wants to feel like they matter, and I get that. Even a quick message like, "Hey, thinking of you guys while I'm at Grandma's," goes a long way in preventing misunderstandings. I make a habit of sending pictures of meals or small notes now, even if it's just a text, "Made some mac and cheese. Wish you guys could have been here." That small gesture has completely shifted the energy. My parents have been better about checking their assumptions too. They've apologized a few times for assuming I was favoring my grandparents, and they've expressed that they understand my perspective as someone recovering from surgery. There's still some teasing. Emily joked about me being the celebrity chef at Grandma's. But it's lighthearted and not accusatory. Grandma and Grandpa are thrilled I help when I can, but they never pressure me anymore. My recovery period taught all of us a lesson about patience, communication, and boundaries. I think everyone involved gained a better understanding of each other's needs. What surprised me the most is how this situation made me more confident in setting limits. I realized that caring for one group of people doesn't automatically make you neglectful of others. It's about intention and communication, not perfection. I can cook for Grandma and Grandpa while still prioritizing my own household. I can help without overextending myself. I can love and support multiple people without guilt. I've also noticed that the tension I felt, this guilt I carried for cooking while recovering, was largely in my head once I clarified expectations. The moment I explained my actions and intentions, the resentment faded. That was empowering. It showed me that being honest and upfront is much better than silently assuming everyone will understand. Now, when I visit either household, the atmosphere feels light and appreciative. Meals are a shared experience, not a competition or a source of judgment. My siblings joke about who gets the best portions, My parents ask for recipes, and my grandparents laugh at my attempts to replicate some of their classic dishes. I never thought cooking during recovery could end up strengthening all my family relationships, but it has. Just in ways I never anticipated. Looking back, I realize I wasn't wrong for cooking for my grandparents. I was recovering and doing the best I could in a temporary situation. What mattered was that I communicated, set boundaries, and made sure my family knew I cared about them too. Everyone has grown from this experience. I've grown too. I feel more grounded, confident, and capable of balancing my responsibilities and relationships. At the end of the day, cooking for my grandparents didn't make me a bad family member. It made me human. It reminded everyone that caring comes in many forms. And sometimes it's about doing what you can in the moment while keeping love and communication at the center. Now, our household is calmer, happier, and a lot more understanding. I even started hosting small family dinners once a week, rotating meals with Emily and Ryan. It's become a tradition I love, and honestly, I'm proud of how far we've come. Not just in meals, but in patience, understanding, and family harmony. Stories number 13. My niece cried for hours because of a joke I didn't think she'd take literally. I never thought a single joke could make a 5-year-old sob like she did. But here we are. So, my niece, let's call her Lily, 5F, is obsessed with a YouTuber named Tommy Vlogs. She watches every video, talks about him non-stop, and even got me to watch some of his kid-friendly challenges. Honestly, he's harmless, funny, and ridiculously energetic. The kind of person who would bounce on a trampoline while holding a cake and somehow not fall. It was Saturday morning, and I was babysitting Lily while my sister went grocery shopping. She was sitting cross-legged on the carpet with her tablet, giggling and shouting, "Tommy did it! He did it!" I smiled and tried to get some chores done nearby, thinking she was harmlessly entertained then, for reasons that seemed hilarious at the time. I decided to tell her a little dramatic joke. I leaned down and whispered, "Hey Lily, guess what? Tommy Vlogs fell off a cliff." She froze. Her little jaw dropped, her eyes filled with confusion. And then, all at once, it hit her. She started crying, huge crocodile tears rolling down her cheeks. "What? Tommy! He can't die!" she yelled. I immediately realized my mistake. I tried to laugh it off, thinking she'd catch the joke. No, I'm kidding. He's fine. He's just pretending for the video." But it was too late. She didn't believe me. She ran to her room, threw herself on the bed, and sobbed like someone had actually hurt her best friend. I followed her, kneeling by the bed, waving my hands and repeating, "It was a joke. He's totally fine, I swear. Nothing worked." She refused to look at her tablet, refused to eat breakfast, and refused to talk about anything except whether Tommy was alive. I tried calling her mother, my sister, to explain what happened. She laughed, not in a mean way, but in a you-should-have-known-better way, for the next 2 hours. Lily alternated between sniffles and asking me if I had called emergency services for Tommy. I had to pretend I was checking the internet to see if he was okay. I even looked up recent videos on YouTube to reassure her. And when I showed them to her, she cautiously peered at the screen, still sniffly, muttering, "I guess he's okay?" By the afternoon, she was finally calm enough to play with her dolls again. But the guilt. Oh man, the guilt was real. I've babysat this kid a dozen times, but apparently, making a tiny joke about something she loves can feel like world-ending trauma at age 5. I learned a valuable lesson that day. 5-year-olds interpret everything literally, everything, and never ever joke about something their favorite person or character getting hurt. Even if the joke is absurd or obviously fictional, they won't get it. They cannot. Lily's still a little wary of me around YouTube now. Every time she sees me, she asks, "Are you going to lie about Tommy?" And I have to nod sheepishly and say, "Nope, not today. I thought I was just making a silly joke." Turns out I nearly traumatized a 5-year-old for 2 hours. So yeah, that's my oops moment. My niece cried for hours because of a joke I didn't think she'd take literally. I'm never joking about Tommy Vlogs again. Update: trying to fix the Tommy Vlogs trauma I caused my niece. So, a few days after the cliff joke disaster, I was still feeling guilty. Lily, 5F, wasn't angry at me exactly, but she definitely treated me with caution. Like I might pull another stunt that would kill her favorite YouTuber. Every time I walked into the living room, she would clutch her tablet like a shield and whisper, "Are you going to lie about Tommy?" I knew I had to do something to regain her trust. I couldn't just brush it off, so I hatched a plan. I decided that we were going to make a Tommy is safe forever day. I told her we'd watch only his videos, make a Tommy survival poster, and maybe even send a drawing to him if we could. She was hesitant at first, arms crossed, eyebrows knitted. But eventually, curiosity won. She peeked at the tablet while I opened a YouTube playlist of Tommy Vlogs videos. Her eyes lit up again, little smiles breaking through the cautious frown. "He's alive," she whispered. "Really?" "Yes, really," I said, putting on my most serious face. "He's fine, I promise." Then came the poster project. I grabbed markers, construction paper, and stickers. I told Lily we were going to make a giant "Tommy is awesome and safe" poster. She immediately started drawing hearts, stick figures of Tommy on trampolines, and even little imaginary cliffs, with tiny safety nets over them. I helped her write, "Tommy is safe forever," in giant letters. She proudly hung it on the living room wall, and I swear she smiled wider than I'd seen in days. I also tried a little realistic reassurance exercise. I told her we'd check Tommy's channel every day for new videos, so she could see with her own eyes that he was alive and kicking. It worked better than I expected. She started checking the tablet herself, whispering updates in hushed tones like she was a news reporter. "Breaking news, Tommy did the obstacle course. Still alive." By the end of the day, she was playing with her dolls again, even pretending they were meeting Tommy on a video set. I felt some relief, but also realized just how seriously kids can take things. 5-year-olds don't separate reality from fiction the way adults do. A joke, no matter how absurd, can feel like a real tragedy to them. Later that evening, she turned to me and said, "Promise you won't say he fell off a cliff again?" I nodded emphatically. "Never again, I learned my lesson. Cliff jokes are banned forever." She smiled, a cautious but genuine smile, and returned to her tablet. And that's when I realized something important. Regaining trust takes effort, especially when it involves a kid who genuinely cares about someone. It's not about gifts or bribes. It's about showing consistency, honesty, and follow-through. I also learned a bit about patience. For 2 hours, I had to reassure her, validate her fears, and provide evidence that Tommy was safe. It wasn't fun, but it was worth it. Because when you see the relief wash over a child's face after a real panic, you realize just how powerful trust is, and how easily it can be shaken. Now, a week later, Lily has mostly forgiven me. She still gives me side-eye whenever I joke about anything related to YouTube. But she's back to laughing at Tommy Vlogs videos without fear, and every now and then, she'll glance at the "Tommy is safe forever" poster and say, "Thanks for helping him," as if I had personally saved him from a cliff. I just smile and nod, silently promising never to test that boundary again. Final update: how my Tommy cliff joke taught both my niece and me a bigger lesson. It's been almost 6 months since the infamous Tommy fell off a cliff incident with my niece Lily on 5F. Honestly, I thought she'd never fully trust me around YouTube again. But time and a little consistency worked wonders. After the first week of the Tommy is safe forever day, I noticed subtle changes. Lily started letting me sit with her during her videos again. She would giggle, occasionally glance at me, and whisper, "You're not going to lie this time, right?" And I'd nod sheepishly, and she'd finally relax over the next few weeks. The cautious side-eye became less frequent, replaced with occasional smiles and even laughter at my silly commentary on the videos. We continued our little rituals. The Tommy survival poster stayed up on her wall, now decorated with more doodles, trampoline stunts, cakes flying in the air, imaginary obstacles with safety nets. Lily even added little speech bubbles to the stick figures, saying things like, "I'm okay," or "Don't worry." It became a daily reassurance tool for her, and she would proudly point it out to anyone who visited. But the most surprising part was how she started transferring that concern and empathy to other things. A week after the incident, she noticed a cartoon character crying on her tablet because they dropped a toy. Lily immediately said, "It's okay, don't cry. You're safe." I nearly laughed out loud. The same intensity she had reserved for Tommy Vlogs was now spilling into her everyday play. For me, the lessons ran deeper. I realized how seriously kids take things that we consider jokes. One tiny slip, one funny comment, had spiraled into hours of panic and tears. I understood why parents and caregivers are so careful with wording and promises. From then on, I became more mindful of the language I used around her, especially with anything she's passionate about. There were moments of testing boundaries, of course. Lily would sometimes feign worry, whispering, "Are you sure Tommy is okay?" just to see my reaction, and I had to remember patience. The first time she did that, I laughed nervously and said, "Yes, he's okay. I promise." But by the third or fourth time, I realized it wasn't about humor. It was about trust. I couldn't just give a casual reassurance. I had to genuinely model reliability and honesty. By the time school started a couple months later, Lily had fully bounced back. She even asked if she could draw a Tommy adventure comic for show and tell. I helped her brainstorm. And she proudly presented a comic where Tommy does ridiculous stunts, trips, but always lands safely. Sometimes with superhero-style safety nets she drew herself. Watching her explain the comic to her classmates, I felt a strange mix of pride and relief. She had turned a traumatic moment into creativity, and I had a small role in helping her process it. Looking back, the whole incident taught me more than I expected. I learned to respect the intensity of a child's feelings, to measure my humor, and to follow through on promises. More importantly, I learned about trust, how fragile it can be, how easily it can be shaken, and how rewarding it is to rebuild it with patience, honesty, and consistency. Even now, when Lily sees me pick up a tablet, she sometimes says with a small smile, "Are you going to lie?" I nod and she giggles, climbing into my lap to watch Tommy vlogs with me. It's quiet reassurance, a ritual now, and it feels like a small redemption for that one joke that went too far. And honestly, I've never looked at YouTube or 5-year-old logic the same way again.